Smash cut to our guy chained up on the ground, facing down a golden boy knight who is about to end his entire career, demanding he accept a holy death. But then, the knight stops and plugs his nose because of a rancid, biohazard smell. Our guy just smirks, telling this absolute clown that his god must have chosen a real barbarian instead, before punching a wooden crate into splinters and pulling out a decaying, dripping goblin head like it's a prize from a claw machine. The knight is standing there, completely gagging, as the blue scar on our guy's chest starts glowing, and he looks at that rotting head with a smile that screams, "I am about to drink this, like a Capri Sun." But to understand how we got to this level of degenerate behavior, we have to go back to the very beginning. Our main character is just a regular corporate slave who fell asleep after a long day of work, only to wake up inside the insanely brutal fantasy game he was playing. Except there's no friendly tutorial wizard, just a silver-haired priestess screaming that demons are swarming them. But our guy doesn't panic. He just grabs a massive battle axe, leaps off a cliff like a complete maniac, and charges straight into a pack of stone gargoyles that look like they belong in a Dark Souls dungeon. The monsters try to jump him, but he splits them right down the middle with a single horizontal swing. He turns the rest of the pack into a fine red paste, letting the chunks rain down onto the stone floor. It is an absolute massacre. He stands in the middle of the carnage, covered in blood, and casually complains that the game's demon realm is a bit too lively today. Honestly, he's just tired. He wants to go home. But first, he has to deal with his incredibly loud teammates, starting with Melissa. A giant meteor strikes the ground right behind him, and Melissa screams his name, scolding him like a disappointed mother for rushing ahead without the tank. Then we see a shiny sword sliding out of its sheath as a golden boy knight dashes forward, slicing a demon in half with perfect main character form. This is Gale, the actual hero of this world. He tells Melissa to save the scolding for later because they have a raid to finish. Melissa just sighs, summoning a fireball, annoyed by how textbook heroic Gale is. Behind them, the blindfolded priestess Cyril folds her hands in prayer, worrying that our guy, Sir Kadim, is pushing himself way too hard. Meanwhile, a giant demon gets its head absolutely caved in by a massive mace. That mace belongs to Priest Gordon, who tells Cyril not to worry, because Kadim always has a plan. Gale suggests they clean up the trash mobs first and talk later. So who is this giant mountain of muscle? His name is Kadim. He's the vanguard of the hero's party, and his sole purpose in life is to help these anime tropes defeat the great demon. But deep down, he is just a modern guy who has never even wrung a chicken's neck, forced to survive in a game where the main plot is incredibly simple: gather companions, kill the demon king, save the world. For most players, that sounds like a fun weekend. But for our guy, living inside this hyper-realistic nightmare is a psychological horror show. To keep up with these god-gifted heroes, he had to choose a unique trait called Blood Berserker. Every time he drinks demon blood, he gets a massive, temporary stat boost, allowing him to tear high-level monsters apart with his bare hands. So yes, he literally has to eat demon flesh and drink black sludge to stay relevant. It works, but it turns him into a terrifying blood-soaked demon himself. The more he drinks, the more he hates this world, wanting to escape it faster and faster. He stands on a mountain of corpses, chewing on raw demon meat, totally losing his mind. A female succubus-type demon lunges at him, but he catches her by the face mid-air, laughing like a psychopath and telling her he is going to drink every single drop of her blood. His face is practically mutating from the corruption, looking like a literal sleep paralysis demon. Suddenly, a bright, holy light shines down on him, and Melissa's voice cuts through the red haze, begging him to snap out of it. But the madness is too strong. Kadim reaches out and grabs Melissa by her throat, choking the life out of her. She doesn't fight back, she just wraps her hands around his arm, whispering his name. The touch of his comrade finally breaks the spell, and his monstrous traits fade away as he drops her in horror. The game description wasn't lying. The demonic energy is slowly, permanently eating his sanity. He realizes he's getting so bad, he can barely recognize his own friends. What used to be just a paragraph of text in a gaming UI is now a living, breathing cancer in his brain. The blood he used to throw up from tasting now tastes sweet, and the urge to kill is becoming impossible to suppress. He looks down at his reflection in a puddle of blood, wondering what happens if he goes completely insane before they even reach the final boss. He has to kill the great demon. He has to do it now. Melissa hugs him from behind, telling him she's fine and not to blame himself. She promises that they will protect him just like he protected them. Kadim can only look at her with deep guilt, whispering an apology. Cyril and Gordon walk up, promising they will do whatever it takes to keep him sane. Gordon even tries to lighten the mood, joking that he'll beat him back to his senses if he has to. Gale steps forward, his boots squelching in demon guts, and looks at his battered, exhausted vanguard. He extends a hand, asking if he's rested enough to finish this. Kadim takes a deep breath and grasps the hero's gauntlet. They push forward, dragging their broken bodies through the final stretch, until at long last, they face the final boss. Kadim delivers a brutal, overhead axe strike, spinning through the air like a human hurricane of fire and steel. The final boss lets out a deafening screech before its colossal, armored body starts to crumble. It collapses onto the stone floor, causing a massive dust cloud. Melissa stands in the wreckage, looking at the sky, clutching her spellbook, and asking if it's really over. Gordon places a hand on her shoulder, smiling warmly, and saying that, by God's grace, they actually did it. Melissa's eyes go wide, as a blinding, celestial light suddenly breaks through the clouds. They saved the world. The sky is clearing up, illuminating the ruined battlefield. But Cyril crawls on the ground, calling out, asking where Sir Kadim went. Through the dust, they see a massive silhouette walking away, carrying his battle axe. Gale screams for him to stop, asking why he's walking into the dark abyss when the exit portal is right there. Kadim stops, standing on the edge of the world. He looks back over his shoulder, a soft, genuine smile on his face. He tells them it was an absolute honor to fight by their side in person, instead of just watching them behind a computer screen. And with those final words, he walks into the bright white light of the exit. Gale reaches out, screaming his name, but his hand only catches empty air as Kadim vanishes. Our guy falls through a vertical void of red and black, his body finally letting go of all the accumulated pain and stress. He looks up at the disappearing light, completely exhausted, but deeply relieved. He lands on a solid floor in pitch darkness, taking his first steps in what feels like eternity. He's back in his regular, unmutated human body. No demon traits, no madness. He looks around, thinking the darkness is just like when he first crossed over. He starts planning his return. First, he's grabbing a cold beer from the fridge, and then he is sleeping for 3 days straight. He swears to himself he is never playing a medieval RPG again. He feels a bit bad for not saying a proper goodbye to his party, but he has to accept reality. Sir Kadim, the legendary berserker, is gone forever. He approaches a giant, glowing white doorway, thinking once he steps through, he'll finally be back in his messy apartment. But as he gets closer, his eyes go completely wide with terror, sweat pouring down his face. He lets out a shaky, hysterical laugh, begging the universe that this is just a bad dream. The glowing white doorway reshapes itself into a giant, golden holy cross, and a massive, booming sound echoes through the void. He throws his head back, laughing like a man who has officially lost his last marble, as his shadow on the wall transforms back into the massive, horned beast he spent years trying to cure. The glowing letters appear in front of him. NW Game Plus, restarting the game. The game literally looked at his perfect clear and said, "Do it again, sweetie." We open on a scenic green valley, where a massive caravan of prisoners is being marched down a dirt road. Everyone is in chains, their hands bound tightly by heavy iron cuffs. They are being dragged along like cattle by armored soldiers carrying long spears. One old guy in the crowd starts crying, screaming that he's innocent and that the baker's son was the real thief. A guard immediately snaps at them to shut their mouths before they get a spear to the ribs. The prisoners instantly quiet down, looking at the dirt in terror. The guard just scoffs, muttering that these trash-tier peasants love to run their mouths. Suddenly, another merchant-looking prisoner taps the guard's shoulder, begging for mercy. The guard turns around, highly annoyed, asking what he wants now. The merchant cries that he was framed and never sold illegal demon parts, begging to speak with the inspector. The guard just stares at him with an expression that says, "Do I look like a customer support rep?" The merchant realizes he's completely cooked, knowing that some soldiers frame innocents just to hit their monthly arrest quotas. The guard looks up at a knight, riding a white horse at the front, thinking this rookie kid is already pulling corrupt stunts to boost his career. But the guard's face goes cold as he looks back at the merchant, smiling with some very yellow teeth. He yells at the merchant, asking how he dares to doubt a holy knight of the Elga religion. The merchant instantly backs down, sweating bullets and apologizing. The guard watches him walk back to his spot, muttering that, since a holy knight is involved, this poor bastard is going to get executed anyway. He literally whispers, "Hope you get a better spawn point in your next life." The guard then looks to the back of the line, sweating slightly as he checks on the VIP prisoner. Walking right behind the merchant is a towering, jacked barbarian, who makes the other prisoners look like toddlers. The guard is genuinely baffled, wondering how the hell the recruit squad managed to capture a literal human tank. And yes, that barbarian is our guy, Kadim. Back at level 1, wearing nothing but a fuzzy loincloth and heavy chains. Kadim is staring at the sky, his brain completely fried trying to figure out what is happening. He looks down at his hands. His body feels familiar, but all the god-tier endgame power he spent 50 years grinding is completely gone. On the bright side, the lingering demonic madness and guilt from his first run have vanished too. His brain is finally clean. He remembers the New Game Plus message and realizes the system must have force restarted his entire campaign. But he's still confused. In the actual game, the barbarian starting class never, ever began as a chained slave in a transport caravan. An old, kind-faced prisoner chained next to him whispers, "Hey there," breaking him out of his thoughts. The old man reaches out with his chained hands, holding a couple of dried, dirty roots. He tells Kadim to chew on them while they walk, so the march is less boring. Kadim just stares at him, probably wondering if this old man is trying to poison him. The old man smiles warmly, saying some barbarians helped him a long time ago, and seeing Kadim reminds him of those good guys. It's not much, but it's all he has to offer. Kadim takes the roots with his chained hands. He starts chewing on them, asking the old man how he got caught. The old man just shrugs, saying he doesn't even know. Kadim nods, looking at the peaceful green fields around them. The old man sighs, complaining that the holy knights of the empire are way too hostile towards heretics nowadays. He mutters that believing in a different god shouldn't be a death sentence. Kadim stops chewing, his eyes wide. He asks, "The empire? There's an empire on this continent?" The old man looks at him like he's stupid, asking if he's seriously never heard of the Lucanian Empire. Kadim's mind starts racing. Lucanian was a tiny, peaceful kingdom in the center of the continent during his first playthrough. A kingdom? The old man laughs, saying people used to call it a kingdom a long, long time ago. Kadim realizes this isn't just a parallel world. He has been dropped into a future timeline where the kingdom he saved turned into a massive, tyrannical empire. He asks where they are heading. The old man says they are marching straight to the holy capital, Lucaon, where they will be summoned before the judges of Elga. Kadim is actually relieved, thinking, "Oh neat, so they won't kill me right away. I have time to plan an escape." The old man looks at him like he has lost his mind, screaming, "What is there to be relieved about?" He explains that the Inquisitors are absolute, red-eyed sadists who treat heretics like new toys. He starts describing the torture methods in vivid detail. They'll drive iron nails into your gums, then pour boiling molten iron into your nostrils. Suddenly, a white warhorse gallops up from behind, and the arrogant rookie knight drives the blunt end of his spear straight into the old man's face. The impact is brutal. The old man is sent flying, crashing onto the dirt road, spitting blood. The knight raises his spear, screaming to the crowd that anyone who insults a holy knight of Elga must wash away their sins with a quick death. Talk about a massive power trip. He then slowly turns his head, a smug, punchable grin on his face, as his horse takes a few slow steps towards our guy. The knight looks down at Kadim, asking if he was the barbarian who caused this commotion. Kadim just stares back at him with a deadpan, unbothered expression that is highly disrespectful. The knight tells him that if he doesn't want to end up like the old man, he better bow his head and beg for forgiveness right now. Kadim doesn't bow. Instead, he just smirks, his eyes glinting with pure, unadulterated disrespect. The knight's face instantly goes red with rage, screaming, "How dare a mere heretic savage mock me?" He yells that this is blasphemy, raises his spear, and channels a bright blue, glowing, holy light through the blade as he rides forward. Kadim watches the spear tip, coming straight for his eyes, completely calm. The knight thinks he has this in the bag, but his eyes go wide with shock as Kadim raises his chained hands and catches the spearhead barehanded, using the thick iron cuffs to block the holy light. The knight tries to pull his weapon back, but his arms are shaking as Kadim holds the spear in a vice grip. The knight screams at him to let go, his veins popping. Kadim just smiles, saying, "Well, if you insist," and he violently yanks the spear forward, throwing the horse and the knight completely off balance. The knight is furious, calling him a heretical bastard, and screaming that he will pass judgment. But his pupils dilate in pure terror as Kadim leaps high into the air, his massive body casting a shadow over the sun, preparing a chained fist slam. He smashes his hands down like a meteor, causing a massive explosion of dust and dirt. When the dust clears, the horse is gone, and the rookie knight is face planted in the grass several yards away. The horse is lying on its side, completely dazed, and the knight is knocked out cold, his pristine armor covered in mud. Kadim stands there, looking down at them, but he doesn't look happy. Sure enough, the knight groans, pushing himself up, calling Kadim a filthy heretic. He stands up, using his spear to support his weight, bleeding from his mouth. Kadim clicks his tongue, realizing that even though this guy is an absolute clown, he's still a holy knight. At level 1, Kadim's raw physical strength isn't enough to secure a one-shot kill. The knight raises his spear, the tip glowing with a brilliant gold light that looks like a miniature sun. He points it to the heavens, shouting, "O Elga, master of eternal light." Kadim grits his teeth, realizing this is about to get very bad. The knight chants, asking his god to strike down this demon minion. A massive column of solid holy energy rains down from the sky, engulfing the entire road. With a crazed scream, the knight thrusts his spear forward, releasing a devastating wave of golden fire. The blast tears up the dirt road, heading straight for our guy. Kadim raises his arms to block, realizing he doesn't have the speed stats to dodge this attack. The golden light completely swallows him in a massive, blinding flash. The impact is so strong, it completely shatters the heavy iron chains on his hands, sending metal links flying everywhere. Kadim is thrown back, crashing violently into a wooden cargo wagon, splintering the frame. He sits in the wreckage, clutching his chest. His skin is singed, and he is bleeding, but his eyes are still sharp. The knight walks up to him, genuinely surprised that the barbarian survived a high-level holy spell. He scoffs, walking over with slow, arrogant steps, saying Kadim's durability is as brutish as his face. Kadim checks his system status. All his abilities are reset, and the only thing he has left is his unique trait, Blood Berserker. He looks at his bleeding hand, thinking he wouldn't be struggling this much if there was even a single, low-level demon nearby to feed on. He looks around, trying to find a way out of this desperate situation. Suddenly, his eyes eyes twitch. He smells something incredibly sweet and intoxicating, drifting from the shattered wagon behind him. The knight stands over him, raising his spear, saying this is the end of the line. He tells him to receive forgiveness through death, his spear glowing with lethal energy. But the knight stops mid-sentence, his eyes widening in disgust. He plugs his nose with his gauntlet, gagging and asking what that horrific smell is. Kadim just starts chuckling, a low, creepy sound. He slowly stands up, laughing hysterically. The knight looks at him like he's a lunatic, asking if he has gone insane before his death. Kadim smiles, his eyes turning blood red as the blue scar on his chest flares with power. He looks at the knight and says, "It seems your god Elga has chosen me, rookie." With a violent thrust, he shoves his hand deep into the broken cargo crate behind him and pulls out a severed, decaying goblin head, dripping black, toxic blood. The knight takes a step back, completely disgusted by this absolute barbarian behavior. But Kadim doesn't care. The demon-related blood smells like a 5-star meal to his berserker nose. His chest glow intensifies, and he looks at the golden boy with a dark shadow over his eyes, grinning like an absolute psychopath who is about to turn this entire valley into a graveyard. He is about to feast, and this golden knight is first on the menu. Alright, so here we are. Our guy is level 1, completely battered, and currently squeezing a decaying goblin head like it is a cheap juice box. The black, viscous demon blood begins to pour down, and he downs it without flinching. Absolute savage behavior. Most people would throw up their lungs, but to a corrupted blood berserker, this is basically a high-protein pre-workout. The blue cross on his chest flares to life, and the buff activates. The entire battlefield goes dead silent as the caravan watch this absolute madman chug monster fluids in the middle of a dirt road. Linton looks like he is about to throw up his holy lunch just watching this. He is gagging behind his gauntlet, completely disgusted by how filthy this barbarian is. So, being the courageous leader he is, Linton immediately delegates the problem. He points at a random, low-wage spearman and tells him to go finish off that disgusting freak. The poor guard slowly steps forward. Meanwhile, steam is literally rising off Kadim's muscles as his veins turn black with corruption. The guard is trembling so hard his helmet is practically rattling. He knows he is the sacrifice play here. He tries to muster up some courage, screams at the top of his lungs, and charges with his spear. But our guy does not even bother dodging. Before the spear can even make contact, Kadim's hand moves like a flash of lightning, grabbing the guard's face in a vice grip. The pure physical force of the Blood Berserker buff is no joke. Even at level 1, his grip strength is basically a hydraulic press. The guard instantly starts crying, begging for his life as his helmet begins to buckle under the pressure. Kadim just lifts him off his feet with one arm, staring him down with eyes that have completely lost their humanity. The fingers sink deeper, bone begins to crack, and the screaming abruptly stops. Linton is completely frozen. He has never seen a level 1 prisoner pull off a skull crush with his bare hands. Kadim slams the corpse into the dirt, a shockwave of dark red aura erupting around him as he fully embraces the madness. He wipes the black blood from his chin and analyzes the feedback. It was only a lesser demon's head, so he only got a basic physical enhancement. No crazy magical traits, but honestly, to get out of this slave caravan, a basic strength multiplier is more than enough. He lets out a primal roar that literally splits the clouds, the raw red mana radiating off his skin like steam. The remaining Imperial guards are sweating bullets. They look at each other, realizing they are definitely not being paid enough to fight a literal demon in human skin. One of the veteran mustache guards looks at Kadim's glowing eyes, and his brain instantly registers the ultimate threat level. He shouts that this guy is a monster, completely abandoning his post. The spear clatters to the dry dirt as the line completely collapses. Everyone starts running for the hills, leaving the cargo, the prisoners, and their glorious commander behind. Linton is absolutely losing his mind, screaming at them to stand their ground. He points out that the barbarian is unarmed and already wounded. He threatens them with military law and execution, desperately trying to get anyone to stand between him and the monster. He claims a few more spear thrusts will kill him, but nobody is listening. Linton looks back, and his heart drops, because Kadim just picked up that heavy, bloody goblin head and chucked it at him like a high-speed dodgeball. It hits Linton square in the chest, completely throwing him off balance. The majestic, golden-trimmed holy knight falls flat on his back, groaning in the dirt like a complete loser. He rolls over, only to find the gross, decaying face of the goblin staring back at him. And then, he hears the heavy, rhythmic thudding of footsteps. The ground is literally vibrating. Kadim is sprinting toward him like a freight train with zero brakes. Linton panics, scrambled to his feet, and plants his golden spear into the ground, desperately channeling every ounce of holy power he has left. He starts praying to Elga, the god of eternal light, begging for a miracle. He calls upon the divine power to smite the demon's servant, his eyes glowing with bright golden energy as the spear charges up. Kadim does not care about the light show. He leaps high into the air, diving straight through the holy radiation. Linton screams his god's name, unleashing a blinding blast of golden energy directly at the descending giant. The impact splits the air, a massive explosion of holy light engulfing Kadim's entire body. Linton starts laughing hysterically, thinking he just secured a promotion. He tells the barbarian to beg for forgiveness in the next life. But as the smoke clears, a dark shadow looms over him. Kadim is standing right in front of him, completely untouched by the holy magic. He asks the rookie if that pathetic spark was really his best shot. Linton's face goes completely pale. The smugness drains out of him instantly as he begins to shake. Kadim winds up a fist that is larger than Linton's entire head and delivers a straight right hand to the jaw. The gold-trimmed helmet completely shatters as Linton is sent flying through the air, spitting blood and teeth. The sound of knuckles meeting metal and bone echoes through the open field. Our guy mounts him and starts delivering a systematic beatdown, pounding Linton's face into absolute mush. Linton whimpers, begging him to stop. The majestic holy knight now looks like a swollen, tear-soaked potato. He cries, apologizing and begging for mercy just this once. Kadim actually stops. He stands up, turns his back, and prepares to leave. Linton lies there, gasping for air, clutching his bruised chest. Linton mutters a pathetic thank you, watching the barbarian walk away. But the very millisecond Kadim's back is turned, Linton's expression turns venomous. He whispers that he will hunt this barbarian scum down and tear him apart for this humiliation. He lies in the grass, heavily panting, already plotting his grand revenge. He swears in the name of Elga that he will have his vengeance. But then, he notices a shadow creeping over him. The sharp metal tip of an imperial spear is slowly dragging along the dirt, carving a line straight toward him. Heavy leather boots stop right beside his head. Linton looks up, and his remaining eye dilates in absolute, paralyzing horror. All the courage he just manufactured evaporates into a high-pitched whimper. Kadim grips the iron spear, pointing out how hilarious it is that the rookie is still praying to his god at a time like this. He looms over the fallen knight like the Grim Reaper himself, the red steam of his berserker aura swirling around him. He tells Linton he hopes he can spend some quality time with his god in the afterlife. Linton desperately screams for him to wait, but our guy does not do dialogue options. He thrusts the spear down with absolute force. The spear drives straight through the holy plate armor, pinning the rookie knight to the dirt. Linton Polypus is officially out of the game. Kadim stands over the corpse, his expression completely cold. But he is not celebrating. He looks toward the horizon and spots the fleeing silhouettes of the guards who ran away earlier. They are still sprinting, screaming at each other to hurry. Kadim bends down and picks up another spear from the dirt. He remembers the most important lesson from his first 50-year playthrough. The guards are gasping for air, thinking they finally put enough distance between themselves and the slaughter. The mustache guard looks back one last time just to make sure they are clear, and a spear flying at Mach 3 pierces straight through his skull. What follows is a literal masterclass in Olympic javelin throwing. Kadim systematically snipes the fleeing guards from hundreds of yards away, pinning them to the earth one by one. Because in a dark RPG, leaving a single witness means an entire high-level division shows up at your door 3 days later. You leave no loose ends. 2 guards are shivering in the bushes nearby, holding their breath and praying they get passed over. They are sweating bullets, trying not to make a sound. But Kadim slowly turns his head, his sharp senses locking onto their location. He winds up and launches his last spear directly into the thick foliage. The impact completely tears through the branches, splitting the wood. And the hidden guard is pinned to the soil, spitting blood as his life bar drains to 0. Kadim walks back to the prisoner cart, completely drenched in blood. One of the surviving captives looks up and calls out to him. The gray-haired prisoner chuckles nervously, praising him for killing the corrupt holy knight. He asks if Kadim can use his keys to get their shackles off so they can discuss their next move. But Kadim does not offer them a key. He offers them a heavy right hand directly to the face, silencing the speaker instantly. The remaining prisoners are sprayed with fresh blood, their eyes wide with sheer terror as they realize something horrifying. Kadim steps forward, his foot crushing the dirt. He repeats the core rule of his survival. The captives desperately try to scramble back, their chains rattling in panic. You never, ever leave any loose ends. He leaps into the air, preparing to wipe out every single witness to this massacre. The prisoners scream in absolute despair, realizing they just traded a corrupt knight for a literal demon. A close-up of a prisoner's face, completely frozen in terror, as the shadow of death falls over him. The prisoners scream, demanding to know what they did wrong to deserve this. But our guy is playing on Iron Man mode. He does not have room for mercy. He drives a spear down without hesitation. Another captive begs for salvation, but the red-eyed vanguard remains completely stoic as he cleans up the battlefield. He stands under the crimson twilight sky, his broad back covered in the blood of his enemies and allies alike. The road is a silent graveyard. Imperial soldiers and innocent prisoners lie side by side in the grass. Kadim reasons that if he lets a single prisoner live, they will eventually get captured by the Empire, and blab about the barbarian who slaughtered a holy knight. Worst case scenario, the Church of Elga sends an elite holy division to hunt him down while he is still level 1. That is a risk he simply cannot afford to take. Suddenly, he hears a tiny, trembling gasp from the bushes nearby. He walks over and finds the framed merchant from the slave caravan. clutching his head and shivering in fear. The merchant screams in terror as Kadim plants his bloody spear right next to his head. Kadim stares down at him, declaring that this one is the last. He slowly raises the spear to deliver the final strike. The merchant weeps, screaming that this is completely unfair. The spear stops mid-air. The merchant begs for his life, crying that he did nothing wrong and was framed by the corrupt guards. Kadim looks at him with dead, empty eyes. He asks a very logical question. Why should he care? The merchant weeps about his wife and child waiting for him back home, pleading that he is just an innocent victim. Kadim agrees that he seems innocent. But innocence does not stop the Empire from tracking him down. He tells the merchant to just close his eyes and get it over with. In a desperate, last-second bid for survival, the merchant shouts, "Don't you need a guide?" Kadim freezes. His interest is officially piqued. The merchant frantically explains that he is a traveling merchant from Multana, part of the Free Cities Alliance, and knows every single trade route and shortcut on the continent. Kadim lowers the spear and decides to ask him a few questions. He asks when Lucanyon became an empire, noting that in his memory, it was definitely just a peaceful kingdom. The merchant looks completely bewildered by the question. He starts theorizing that this massive barbarian must be from the absolute wildlands beyond the mountain ranges, a tribe that has been out of touch with civilization for centuries. Kadim glares at him, demanding an immediate answer. The merchant quickly rattles off that they are currently in the year 248 of the imperial calendar. It has been nearly 2.5 centuries since the founding emperor turned the kingdom into a massive, expansionist empire. Kadim's eyes widen slightly. He asks what year it would be according to the old calendar. The merchant rubs his chin, trying to calculate a dead calendar system. He says it would be roughly the year 1130. Our guy is completely stunned. The standard calendar he used during his entire 50-year grind is now considered ancient history. He demands to know the current state of the continent, what happened to the Elga faith, and what is going on in the demon realm. The merchant explains that the Empire unified the continent 3 centuries ago, but now things are fractured, divided into 3 major powers. He explains that the fanatical Elga faith used a massive demonic outbreak to expand their political influence. As for the demon realm, no one who has ever stepped foot in there has ever returned alive. So it is a complete mystery. Kadim is visibly shaken. He cannot believe no one survived the demon realm. He thinks of his old comrades, Gale, Melissa, Gordon, and Cyril. He asks the merchant if he has ever heard any of these legendary names. The merchant shakes his head, saying he has never heard of them in his life. But then, he pauses. His eyes light up as he repeats the name Melissa. He mutters that the name actually sounds oddly familiar. He mumbles, trying to recall some ancient folklore or history lesson. Kadim is having an absolute existential crisis. The legendary heroes who literally saved the world and conquered the demon realm have been completely forgotten by history. He wonders if this is even the same world from his first playthrough. His eyes narrow as a deep, exhausting dread settles in his chest. He asks why there are still demons running rampant if the great demon was slain. The merchant just shrugs, saying nobody actually knows. He mentions that the church claims it is divine punishment from Elga because the world has become corrupt and fallen. Others whisper that a rogue archmage opened a permanent rift to another dimension, or that a supreme evil is preparing to descend. But the merchant concludes that only the gods above the clouds know the real truth. Kadim stands in absolute silence, absorbing the grim reality. He drives his spear deep into the dirt, letting go of the weapon. He walks past the trembling merchant without saying a word. He stands on the edge of the hill, looking out over the vast, unfamiliar landscape under the dimming twilight. He realizes he is indeed on the same continent, but 300 years have passed since he walked away from his companions. The crushing despair hits him all at once. He was kicked out of his modern reality, worked 50 years to save this world, and now he has been discarded into a future that does not even remember his name. All the game knowledge in his head is centuries out of date, and his companions, whom he parted with just a moment ago in his timeline, are nothing but a handful of dust in this era. He looks back at the dead bodies strewn across the road. He wonders what the point of living even is. Why should he suffer through the agonizing grind again, choking down disgusting demon blood and fighting off permanent brain rot? There is absolutely no guarantee that reaching the ending a second time will actually send him home. What if some sadistic god just restarts him in a new game +3, or a new game +4? It is an endless, agonizing loop. He snaps the thick wooden spear shaft over his muscular chest with a loud crack. The merchant gasps, staring at him like he has completely lost his mind. Kadim raises the jagged, broken wooden point directly to his own throat. He grips it tightly with both hands, ready to plunge it into his neck and end the cycle once and for all. The merchant panics, screaming, asking what on earth he is trying to do. Kadim thinks to himself that if he starts this journey again, he will just build more attachments that will eventually turn to dust. If he is going to end it, now is the perfect time. He tightens his muscles, preparing to drive the wooden spike home. He prays that whatever lies after death, it is not a pitch-black screen with a flashing game over sign. He closes his eyes, bracing for the impact. The sharp wooden edge presses against his skin, drawing a tiny bead of blood. But in that split second, a memory of Melissa flashes in his mind. He remembers her smiling, talking about how she wanted to teach magic and build a magnificent mage tower after they defeated the great demon. His eyes snap wide open, filled with a sudden, desperate spark of hope. He lunges forward, grabbing the merchant by his vest. He demands to know if the merchant really knows the name Melissa. The merchant shakes, stammering that he is not entirely sure, but he believes the legendary first master of the mage tower carried that exact name. Kadim shakes him, demanding to know where this tower is. The merchant squeaks out that it is in Vestana, a city on the far eastern border of the Free Cities Alliance. But he warns that they are currently in the dead center of the empire, and traveling there will take at least 2 months of continuous, highly dangerous marching. Kadim drops him, staring off into the distance as his mind races. A slow, devious smirk forms on his face. He curses his old companion in his head. Even from beyond the grave, Melissa managed to find a way to deny him a peaceful death. He smiles, realizing he cannot die just yet. He orders the merchant to act as his guide and find the absolute fastest route to the mage tower. The merchant panics, crying that he has a family to support. He stammers that he cannot afford to waste months playing tour guide for an escaped barbarian slave. Kadim grabs the merchant's shoulder, his fingers digging in with terrifying pressure. He smiles warmly and offers to pay him with the most valuable asset he possesses, his actual life. The merchant lets out a high-pitched shriek of pure compliance. Kadim chucks the broken wooden spear into the dirt. He tells the merchant to find the keys on the guards, unlock his shackles, and gather all the supplies they can carry. They are leaving immediately. Among the broken debris of the Imperial carriage, a standard steel broadsword lies in its sheath. Kadim picks it up, unsheathing the cold metal. He notes that it is serviceable enough for a start. He looks at the golden spear of the fallen rookie knight. It is tempting, but high-grade blessed weapons consecrated by the priests of Elga will reject any user who does not carry the holy mark. It is practically useless to him. He sighs, wishing he could have brought his legendary black battle axe from his first playthrough. But you play with the hand you are dealt. The merchant is fully packed, carrying a massive red pack on his back. He sighs, glad to be alive, but gasps when he looks over at his new boss. Kadim is currently squeezing the blood from the goblin's head into a leather flask, saving every drop of that sweet, sanity-rotting power source for later. He straps the new steel sword to his hip. He turns back to the terrified merchant and tells him it is time to move. With the sunset painting the sky a deep orange, the unlikely duo begins their long, grueling journey toward the mage tower of Vestana. Sometime later, a flock of black crows begins to circle over the gray, cloudy sky. They land on the decaying remains of the Imperial transport squad, picking at the flesh. Suddenly, a pair of highly polished, heavy armored boots steps into the frame, scaring the birds away. A stern voice notes that they finally found the missing squad. An Imperial soldier reports to his captain, confirming that every single soldier and prisoner has been systematically executed. He asks for orders. The camera pans up to reveal a stunning blonde woman in heavy white and gold plate armor, her emerald eyes filled with a cold, analytical fury. This is Captain Helia. She orders her subordinate, Edan, to search the area for any physical clues. She points out that they cannot return to the Archbishop and simply report that his favored rookie was slaughtered like a dog. Edan salutes and goes to search. Helia sighs, muttering that Linton was an absolute idiot who probably brought this on himself. She looks down at Linton's pinned, bloated corpse, wondering what kind of powerful heretics would dare to murder a high-ranking holy knight of the Empire. Her expression hardens into a terrifying glare. She declares that whoever did this, they have officially signed their own death warrants, and the Church of Elga will hunt them to the absolute ends of the earth. Hashtag Section C. The E3 question continuity check 1. Would someone who genuinely did not know this story care what happens next after reading this? Yes. The script establishes a clear, high-stakes goal. Kadim is traveling to the Mage Tower to find traces of his long-lost companion Melissa, in a world where his past achievements have been completely erased. He also has a volatile Blood Berserker sanity mechanic that keeps him on a ticking clock. 2. Did I make the viewer feel something real at least twice in this batch? Yes. First, during the brutal dark turn in Chapter 3, where Kadim turns on the innocent prisoners to protect his cover, highlighting his ruthless survival instinct. Second, during Kadim's existential despair in Chapter 4, where he is ready to take his own life to escape the endless New Game Plus loop, only to be saved by a fleeting, precious memory of Melissa. 3. Are there at least 2 questions still open when the batch ends? Yes. First, how will Kadim survive the journey to Vestana with a high-level Holy Knight Captain Healy hot on his trail? Second, what happened to Melissa and her mage tower over the last 300 years? And is she somehow still alive in this era? We start under a quiet moon. Our guy is currently camped out in a dark forest, resting by the embers of a dying fire. He looks completely asleep. The blue cross on his chest is dark, and his breathing is steady. But if you look closely, his gear is neatly packed, and his sword is right within arm's reach. Suddenly, we hear heavy, panicked breathing tearing through the trees. It is Duncan. He is running like his life depends on it, whispering that he finally got away. He is sweating bullets, muttering that he has to put as much distance between himself and that camp as humanly possible. Let's look at this from his perspective. At first, getting a massive, strong traveling companion seemed like a great survival strategy. But then, he remembers his companion is a literal barbarian who drinks black monster blood and executes entire squads of Imperial Knights without blinking. Over the last few days, Duncan tried his absolute best to be the perfect assistant, offering his best dried snacks, building warm fires, and even trying to make polite conversation, before realizing his boss is not a big talker. Our guy barely speaks a word, refuses to answer any questions, and just stares at him with eyes that look like they have seen 1,000 war zones. Duncan realized he was basically playing a game of chicken with a hungry lion, and his head was currently inside its mouth. And honestly, if the silent treatment was the only issue, he might have tried to negotiate. But the real deal breaker is our guy's ridiculous marching speed. Duncan is supposed to be a traveling merchant, a guy who is literally paid to walk long distances for a living. But whenever he points Kadim in a direction, the barbarian just takes off like a rocket, leaving Duncan miles behind. And when Duncan finally catches up, gasping for air, Kadim just stands there with his arms crossed, staring down at him like his latency is too high. He is on the verge of a complete mental collapse. He genuinely believed he was going to die of cardio before they even reached the border. So, he decided to wait for the perfect moment to slip away. Now, deep in the dark forest, he is sprinting through the brush, gasping for air. He is celebrating, thinking that now that they are out of the dense trees, there is no way the barbarian can track his scent. He takes a second to cry a little bit, remembering that he had to leave his massive red backpack behind. That thing had his entire life savings: oil candles, soap, a wool blanket, dry food, and even an antique ring. But he quickly rationalizes that a backpack is not more valuable than keeping his pulse. He stops to catch his breath, looking around at the generic, repetitive scenery, realizing he is completely lost. Still, he is smiling. He thinks he is finally a free man. And then, a voice right behind him asks where he is going in such a hurry. Duncan's face instantly turns into a custom emoji of pure despair. He slowly turns around, and there is our guy, standing under the moonlight, with his sword resting on his shoulder. Kadim steps forward, calmly asking if Duncan forgot about his promised payment. Duncan begins to shake like a wet leaf. He instantly drops to his knees, throwing himself on the dirt, screaming that he has committed a sin worthy of death. He begs for mercy, apologizing over and over again like a professional NPC. Kadim tells him he does not want a refund. He wants a reason, because if they do not fix the issue, Duncan is just going to try this escape act again. He demands a full explanation. Duncan hesitates, looking completely pathetic, before admitting the honest truth. The barbarian's walking pace is just too fast for a human body to handle. He squeezes his eyes shut, fully expecting his head to get separated from his shoulders right then and there. Our guy stands in silence, processing the feedback. Then, he turns around and tells Duncan they are heading back to camp. He casually adds that from now on, he will throttle his speed down a bit. He starts walking back, leaving a very confused merchant on the ground. Duncan just stares at his massive back, completely speechless. Back at the camp, the fire is roaring again. Duncan is fast asleep on the hide blanket, snoring loudly, while Kadim sits on a rock, keeping watch. The merchant is having a massive nightmare, mumbling apologies and begging for his life in his sleep. Kadim just watches him, completely silent. He reflects on his own actions, realizing the fast marching speed is a bad habit he picked up from his first 50-year playthrough. Back then, in the demon realm, there was no such thing as a safe zone. Every second was a race against starvation, dehydration, and the creeping demonic madness of his berserker class. He and his party had to skip meals and sleep, just to keep moving, always paranoid that the next step would be their last. He lets out a long sigh, adjusting to the peaceful silence. In this era, the forest is quiet, there is plenty of clean water, and the madness is currently under control. For now, he can actually afford to take his time. Besides, having Duncan around is actually highly beneficial. The next morning, the merchant points at a wooden signpost, explaining that there is a lot of Imperial military movement near the main border. He suggests taking a wider detour through a less guarded path. Duncan looks at him, waiting for the verdict. Our guy nods, telling him to lead the way. This is a smart tactical play. Kadim has the entire continent's map memorized, but his database is 300 years out of date. Without a local guide, he would probably walk straight into a high-level Imperial garrison. Duncan explains that the local Holy Knights are currently obsessed with padding their arrest records, hunting down heretics and low-level demons with terrifying enthusiasm. Kadim looks down at his leather flask, realizing why it has been so hard to find any wild monsters in this region. The Empire's Knights are basically farming all the local spawns. He opens his flask, checking the dark goblin blood. It is already starting to spoil. He needs to find a fresh target to secure a new supply of blood, just in case a high-level fight breaks out. Later that night, the moon rises over a dense canopy of trees. Duncan parts some tall grass, gasping as his eyes light up. Nestled in a small valley below is a rustic wooden village, surrounded by a tall palisade wall. The gate is wide open, but the streets are completely empty. Duncan notes that it looks like a pioneer settlement, suggesting they head down to ask for some hot food and a roof for the night. But Kadim's eyes narrow as he scans the village. He points out that something is seriously wrong. It is prime dinner time, but there is not a single candle lit in any of the houses. Even worse, the main gates are completely unmanned, with no guards in sight. Duncan asks if it is just an abandoned ghost town, but Kadim tells him the only way to find out is to go down and investigate. The merchant panics, asking if he has lost his mind. What if a horde of monsters attacked, and everyone fled? The heavy wooden gates creak in the wind as they step through. Duncan is shaking, following closely behind, as our guy walks calmly into the center of the dark settlement. Kadim slowly reaches down, placing his hand on the hilt of his basic iron sword. He slowly draws the blade, the cold steel reflecting the moonlight. He grins like an absolute menace, telling Duncan that if there are monsters nearby, that is actually the best news he has heard all day. They walk deeper into the dark, silent village. Duncan notes that the houses do not look abandoned at all. There are carts and tools left out in the open. Suddenly, Kadim stops his stride, his eyes locking onto a dark doorway. He goes completely still. Duncan peeks over his shoulder, whispering to ask why they stopped. Our guy points out that out of all the locked houses in this village, this is the only door left wide open. Suddenly, a shadow moves from the darkness inside. A feral goblin leaps out of the room, brandishing a rusty cleaver with a high-pitched shriek. Its eyes are completely bloodshot and wild. But before it can even make contact, steel flashes through the air. A clean vertical slice divides the air. The severed head lands on the dirt road, and Duncan lets out a classic, high-pitched scream. Suddenly, more heavy footsteps echo from the dark interior. Three massive, muscular goblins step into the moonlight, armed with clubs, axes, and daggers. Kadim analyzes the situation. Goblins in this game are normally timid, cowardly creatures that avoid human contact at all costs. For them to organize and attack like this, a higher-level entity must be controlling them. A wide, dark grin spreads across his face. It looks like they stumbled into the perfect hunting ground. The first goblin screeches, raising its heavy club to strike. Kadim steps forward, a brilliant arc of sword light slicing through the darkness. The remaining two goblins gasp in shock as their leader is instantly split in two. Our guy does not let them catch their breath. He pivots, raising his sword to his shoulder. The second goblin charges in, screaming in fury. But Kadim's blade moves like a blur, slicing straight through its chest. Another clean kill. The third goblin tries to block, steel clashing against steel as the shock of the impact travels up its arms. It tries to counterattack with a rusty axe, screaming at the top of its lungs. But Kadim's movement is completely flawless. He ducks under the swing and drives his blade straight through the goblin's chest, pinning it to the wall. The creature lets out a weak choke as its life bar empties. It slumps forward in a pool of fresh, dark blood. The demonic red aura slowly fades from Kadim's eyes as the room goes quiet. He stands over the corpses, looking completely unfazed. Duncan peeks from behind a crate, trembling as he asks if the danger is finally over. Kadim turns back, calmly admitting he is not entirely sure. Suddenly, a high-pitched screech echoes from the dark hallway behind them. A large, green hand grips the wooden doorframe. A massive, hulking goblin steps into the light, holding a crying, tied-up little girl like a sack of potatoes. Duncan's eyes widen, shouting in horror as he realizes it is a little girl. The goblin screeches, pulling out a sharp knife to execute the hostage. Kadim's hand moves instantly. He flips his sword, holding it by the blade, and launches it like a high-speed javelin. The sword flies straight through the air, impaling the goblin directly through the center of its skull. The giant creature crashes to the floor, releasing the girl, who lands safely on the dirt. Duncan walks over, completely amazed but sweating, asking what Kadim would have done if the throw was slightly off and hit the kid. Our guy walks over, pulls his blade out of the skull, and calmly states that a veteran never misses. He kneels down, using his bare hands to rip the tight ropes off the girl's arms. He looks down at her tears, stating in his standard flat tone that he has some questions for her. He tells her to answer his questions, and he won't hurt her. Unsurprisingly, the kid starts screaming in absolute terror because a massive, blood-drenched barbarian is looming over her. Duncan quickly pushes Kadim aside, waving a cute pink rabbit toy, cooing that they are actually the good guys. He pulls a piece of dried licorice root from his pouch, gently offering it to her, explaining that it tastes sweet if she sucks on it. The little girl slowly calms down, chewing on the sweet root. Kadim watches this, genuinely impressed, noting that Duncan is surprisingly good with children. Duncan chuckles softly, his expression turning gentle as he admits he has a son back home who is about her age. He has a real, human reason to survive this journey. The little girl looks down, her eyes filling with tears as she whispers for her mommy. Duncan smiles warmly, promising that they will help find her family. But Lenny shakes her head, crying that her mommy and daddy were the ones who abandoned her here. The room goes completely cold. Duncan's jaw drops, realizing the horrifying truth of why this child was left tied up in a dark room. Kadim stands in silence, his arms crossed. He looks down at Lenny, realizing the dark reality of this settlement. Suddenly, a desperate voice from outside starts screaming Lenny's name. A woman in peasant robes runs through the gate with a torch, followed by a mob of villagers. The men behind her are frantically whispering for her to keep quiet, warning that the goblins might still be lurking in the shadows. The mother spots Lenny, drops her torch, and throws her arms around her child, crying in relief. She holds her daughter tight, weeping and thanking the heavens. But then, the village men catch up, their torches illuminating the horrific scene of slaughtered goblins in the dirt. The lead villagers are completely stunned, staring at the pile of bodies in disbelief. The chief slowly turns his head, asking if Kadim was the one who did this. Kadim grabs his sword, wiping the green blood off the steel, and coldly states that his sword did the work. His eyes narrow as he locks his gaze on the village chief. He tells them he wants to hear their story, specifically the part about why they decided to sacrifice their own children to a demon. The villagers look down in shame, unable to meet his eyes. The chief lets out a heavy sigh. He explains that this dense forest was originally swarming with wild goblins. Since the soil in their old territory was spent, they burned a section of the forest and built this pioneer settlement. But shortly after they settled, the goblins in the deep woods started behaving erratically, launching coordinated, aggressive attacks against the village. The attacks were relentless, and their casualty list grew longer every single day. In a desperate bid to survive, they gathered all the able-bodied men in the village to hunt down the goblin nest. But deep inside the caves, they encountered something else. A terrifying, mutated goblin demon with hollow, pitch-black eyes and a red-skinned body. The human hunting party was completely overwhelmed. Realizing they stood absolutely zero chance against the demon and its horde, they surrendered, begging for mercy. The demon spared their lives, but it gave them a horrific ultimatum. Every single week, it would return to their settlement. And from each household, they had to offer the most useless child as a physical sacrifice. Duncan is absolutely disgusted. He slams his hand down, shouting at them, asking if they have completely lost their minds for sacrificing children under 10 years old. The chief shouts back in defense, demanding to know who they were supposed to choose. Their fully grown sons who work the fields, their daughters who are about to be married. He argues that if they leave this land now, their crops will fail, and the entire community will starve to death anyway. Kadim stands in the background, listening to the petty squabble. Suddenly, a massive sound echoes through the room as Kadim slams his fist onto the wooden table, shattering it into splinters. The entire room goes dead silent. Our guy looks at the trembling chief, ignoring the moral argument entirely. He asks a highly specific question. How many horns did the demon have on its head? The chief is completely taken aback. He stammers that the creature did not have any horns on its head. Kadim goes quiet, analyzing this crucial bit of metadata. In this RPG world, a demon's power level is directly tied to the number of horns on its head. A hornless demon is basically a low-tier boss, the absolute perfect target for a level 1 blood berserker to harvest fresh, high-quality blood. He grabs his sword sheath. The chief stares at him, completely confused, asking where he wants them to lead him. Kadim hitches his sword to his waist, his expression completely serious. He looks at the villagers and tells them they are heading straight to the demon's lair. #Section C. VHE3HE question continuity check 1. Would someone who genuinely did not know this story care what happens next after reading this? Yes. Kadim is about to raid a demon's lair at level 1 to harvest fresh blood, creating an immediate, high-stakes combat sequence. The viewer wants to see if his low-level stats are enough to handle a mutated demon boss. 2. Did I make the viewer feel something real at least twice in this batch? Yes. First, during the character development moment where Kadim realizes his fast marching speed is a trauma response from his 50-year survival grind, showing a soft, reflective side to his rugged character. Second, during the emotional rescue of Lenny, where Duncan's genuine fatherly warmth contrasts beautifully with the cold, logical calculation of the villagers who abandoned her. 3. Are there at least 2 questions still open when the batch ends? Yes. First, what kind of entity turned the timid goblins aggressive? And is the hornless demon really as weak as Kadim calculates? Second, how will Lady Helia's investigation of the Holy Knights massacre affect Kadim's journey now that he is heading toward a known demon nest? So, we are going to the demon's lair. Our guy does not waste a single second, immediately heading out into the pitch-black night. The village chief leads the way, but you can tell his knees are practically knocking together with every step. He turns back to Kadim, sounding incredibly pathetic, explaining that the village is completely broke and they do not have any gold or food to offer as a reward. Kadim does not even blink. He tells the chief he is doing this because he needs the demon's blood anyway, so they do not owe him a single copper. The chief's eyes light up. He starts thanking this generous mercenary like he just won the lottery. But our guy does not do charity. He reaches over, grabs the chief's iron hand axe, and casually states he will take this as a souvenir. After all, a dual-wield build is always better than single slot. They arrive at the mouth of a massive, dark cave. The chief stops, sweating bullets, and points inside. the entire mob of villagers suddenly halts, their torches flickering in the damp wind. Kadim stands at the front, looking completely relaxed, ready to start the raid. But then, the chief coughs, making a pathetic excuse about how they need to go back and protect the village from a sudden attack. Duncan's jaw drops. He turns on them, screaming, asking if they seriously just walked all this way to act as simple trail signs before running home. Kadim cuts him off, stating that cowards are nothing but a lag spike on a battlefield. He tells the villagers to beat it, then grabs Duncan by the collar, declaring that the merchant is coming with him. He needs a human flashlight to hold the torch while he works. Duncan's face instantly turns into a custom meme of pure regret. This was definitely not in his contract. They step into the freezing, dark cavern, leaving the villagers behind. As they walk, Duncan looks at Kadim, genuinely confused. He asks why the barbarian is not angry at the villagers. They literally traded their own children for some cheap crops, and then ran away like absolute cowards. Kadim keeps his eyes on the path, asking Duncan if he has ever faced a living demon before. Duncan stammers, admitting he has only seen gross demon parts on the black market, but never a live one. Kadim's voice goes incredibly cold. He explains that any normal human who stands face to face with a real demon is permanently broken. The sheer, oppressive weight of demonic mana completely shatters a normal person's free will, leaving them with nothing but a desperate, primal urge to survive. You cannot expect ordinary farmers to have the mental fortitude of a high-level paladin. Duncan looks down, his voice trembling. He points out that even wild beasts will fight to the death to protect their offspring. Kadim keeps marching, stating that sometimes, to survive, humans have to swallow their pride and crawl through absolute filth. The villagers did what they had to do to keep the community alive, so he has no right to judge them. Duncan's expression goes incredibly sad. He whispers that even if that is true, those sacrificed children must feel like the entire world has completely abandoned them. He asks what the point of surviving even is if you have to throw away your actual humanity just to draw breath. Kadim suddenly stops dead in his tracks. Duncan's words hit him like a physical blow. He reflects on his own soul. He spent 50 years wading through oceans of blood, slaughtering monsters, and drinking their toxic fluids just to get back to his modern apartment. His own moral compass is completely warped. He wonders if a simple merchant in a game actually has a better grasp of right and wrong than he does. Duncan notices the heavy silence and panics, thinking he offended the giant. He quickly changes the subject, asking if he thinks the captured kids are still alive. Kadim slowly closes his eyes, clearing his head. He explains that if the demon is just a dumb, feral beast, the kids are already gone. But if the demon is cunning and wicked, it will definitely keep them alive as leverage. Duncan is confused, asking if that is not completely backward. Suddenly, a rusted metal blade gleams in the dark. Duncan lets out a high-pitched shriek, pointing into the shadows. But our guy has already reacted. He raises his arm as Duncan squeezes his eyes shut, bracing for a hit. Kadim launches the chief's hand axe through the dark like a guided missile. The heavy iron blade flies with absolute precision, cutting through the damp air. Heavy, thudding footsteps echo from the darkness. A feral goblin stumbles into the light, the hand axe buried straight in its forehead. It lets out a wet choke, collapsing into the dirt. But the noise alerts the rest of the pack. Dozens of glowing red eyes light up in the dark as a massive horde of goblins charges out. Duncan screams in absolute panic, but Kadim remains completely calm, ordering him to keep the torch high and steady. He takes a heavy step forward, drawing his steel sword. The first goblin tries to swing a rusty dagger, but Kadim's blade is faster, slicing clean through its throat. Another goblin tries to grab him, but Kadim catches its wrist in a bone-shattering grip, using the creature's own body as a meat shield to deflect a club swing from the side. Steel clashes against a rusty blade, sparks flying in the dark. But our guy immediately notices an environmental hazard. The cave is packed with heavy stone stalagmites, severely limiting his ability to swing his longsword. The goblins growl, sensing that the terrain is working in their favor. Kadim wraps the leather strap of his sword tightly around his wrist, securing his grip. He charges directly into the green tide, his eyes completely focused. A wide, horizontal slash cuts through the narrow space. The blade slices straight through a goblin's skull, dark blood spraying the stone walls. He moves like a dancer in a phone booth, systematically dismantling their ranks with precise, lethal thrusts. He looks over at the dead goblin, with his hand axe still stuck in its head, realizing he needs to maximize his damage output. He rips the hand axe free with a wet crunch, splitting another goblin's head open in the same motion. Now, he is dual-wielding, turning the narrow cave into a literal blender of steel and iron. It is a complete, unmitigated slaughter. Goblins are being dismantled at a rate that is frankly terrifying. A severed green head rolls to a stop at Duncan's feet. The merchant lets out a weak groan, looking completely pale. He looks at the absolute mountain of corpses, completely speechless. One level 1 barbarian just cleared a dungeon horde with basic starting gear. The few surviving goblins lose their morale entirely, screeching in terror as they turn around and run. Duncan points, shouting that they are fleeing. Kadim tells him to keep moving. The goblins have lost their numbers, so they will naturally run straight back to their boss for protection. They follow the bloody trail deeper into the cave. Their footsteps echo in the damp, quiet darkness. Duncan notes that the narrow path is starting to widen into a massive underground cavern. He asks if this is the main goblin base. Suddenly, a low, raspy laugh echoes from the shadows ahead. Kadim stops, telling Duncan to back up. The demon is extremely close. He warns him to stay nearby, because if he runs out, the wild goblins will easily hunt him down in the dark. He tells Duncan that if any low-level monsters get too close, just use the burning torch to keep them at bay. Suddenly, Kadim's eyes widen as his danger sense flares. A blur of blood-red movement slices through the dark. Kadim raises both his weapons to block, but the sheer physical impact throws him back. He crashes onto the stone floor, his weapons vibrating from the force. Duncan screams in terror. A massive, red mutant demon steps into the torchlight, its dark eyes locked on Kadim. It hisses, noting that it has never seen this human before. It lets out a sickening, high-pitched laugh, finding the intruder's presence highly amusing. But Kadim is not listening to the villain monologue. He is staring at the top of the demon's head. His heart sinks. There is a small, sharp horn beginning to sprout from its forehead. He curses under his breath, realizing the situation just got significantly worse. We open Chapter 8 with our guy in a very tight spot. He realizes that sprout on the demon's head means it is currently in the middle of evolving from a lesser demon to a mid-tier intermediate demon. This is a massive jump in stats. The red demon grins, loving the look of pure calculation on Kadim's face. It moves like a blur, closing the gap instantly. Kadim's eyes track the motion, barely raising his hand axe to block a lethal strike from its purple claws. The demon hisses that it loves humans because they are weak and obedient. But Kadim has killed far too many of its goblin servants. Kadim's heart is pounding. He only blocked that attack on pure veteran instinct. This monster's speed and raw power are way past the limits of a simple level 1 boss. The demon towers over him, declaring that it is starting to dislike humans, and demands Kadim beg for forgiveness. Our guy quickly runs the numbers. A normal lesser demon can be taken down by a dozen angry villagers. But an intermediate demon? You need an entire squad of fully geared Imperial Knights just to stand a chance. The demon decides to play with its food, offering Kadim a deal. It points its long claw, telling him to use his axe to chop off his own arm, chew up the flesh and bone, and eat every single scrap. If he does that, it might let him live. Kadim ignores the absolute cringe proposal, realizing that while the monster's horn is not fully grown, its evolution is not complete. The demon growls, asking why he is not chopping. Kadim casually drives his steel sword straight into the stone floor, leaving it planted. He looks up, telling the demon that its voice is incredibly annoying, and he has zero interest in taking orders from a walking blood bag. He reaches for his leather flask. He rips the leather open, pouring the dark, viscous goblin blood directly into his mouth. The demon's eyes widen as it catches the scent of the blood, completely shocked that a human is carrying demon fluids. Kadim chugs the spoiled blood, tossing the empty flask aside like trash. The blood hit his system, his veins turning black as his heart starts pounding like a war drum. He lets out a feral roar as the blood berserker buff floods his muscles with raw, chaotic energy. The red demon actually takes a step back, visibly rattled by the sudden spike in physical pressure. Kadim's eyes glow a pure, wild crimson through the dark. He grabs his hand axe. It was old, spoiled blood, so the buff will not last very long. He needs to secure a quick kill. The demon is furious at its own hesitation, wondering how it could possibly feel fear from a mere human. It reminds itself that it has evolved and gained new power. It promises to tear him apart, lunging forward with its razor-sharp claws. Kadim's mind is completely clear. He realizes the demon's judgment has been clouded by the raw power of its new horn, making its movements completely predictable. The demon swipes downward, a wave of wind splitting the air. But to Kadim's buffed senses, the attack is moving in slow motion. He easily ducks under the path, swinging his hand axe to deflect the claws. The demon is forced back, growling in frustration. Kadim looks down at the hand axe, noticing a hairline fracture on the iron blade. If he keeps clashing against those steel-like claws, the axe is going to shatter. He reaches down, grabbing his sword from the ground. It does not matter. If the axe breaks, he will use his sword. If the sword breaks, he will use his fists. He is ending this now. The demon screeches, its eyes glowing with pure hatred. It screams that the human is unforgivable, and charges again. Kadim lunges forward, meeting the demon head-on. He brings his sword down in a massive overhead slash. The blade collides with the demon's crossed claws, a bright flash of sparks illuminating the cavern. The demon's knees buckle under the sheer weight of the impact, completely shocked by the human's physical output. Kadim's veins are practically popping out of his arms as he presses the advantage. The metal screams as they struggle for leverage. The demon is forced to back off, realizing the barbarian has the raw physical advantage. It pants, completely baffled by how a simple human can possess this level of destructive force. It let out a guttural shriek, swiping its claws in a desperate, wide arc. The tip of the claw grazes Kadim's chest, drawing a thin line of blood. The demon leaps back, scrambling up a tall stone pillar to put some distance between them. Kadim immediately pursues, his hand axe swinging through the empty air. The demon climbs higher, panting heavily. Kadim lands on the ground, performing a fluid pivot, keeping his eyes locked on the target. He prepares to jump and bring the pillar down. The demon looks down, its black eyes filled with a sudden, desperate panic. It realizes charging this guy head-on is a complete suicide mission. It needs a distraction. It looks around the cave, sliding down the backside of the pillar. It growls, asking what Kadim actually is. Kadim stands in the center of the cavern, the dark red steam of his berserker aura swirling around his massive frame. The demon realizes there is absolutely no way this thing is human. It is a monster disguised in human skin. It needs a loophole to win this fight. Suddenly, a pathetic scream echoes from the entrance. The demon looks over, its red eyes narrowing. It realizes the perfect target is standing right there. It is Duncan, currently backed into a corner by two stray goblins. He is desperately waving his burning torch, screaming at them to back off. The goblins are hesitating because of the heat, but they are slowly closing in. The torch is the only light source in the entire cavern. The demon grins, realizing that if it can take out that torch, the cave will go completely pitch black, giving it the ultimate home turf advantage. It coils its legs, preparing to launch itself at the merchant. But Kadim's veteran mind has already read the play. He shifts his weight, his fingers tightening around the handle of his hand axe. He looks at the demon, his red eyes completely cold. It is incredibly obvious what the monster is trying to do, and our guy is definitely not going to let it have its way. Hashtag Section C. VE3 Question Continuity Check 1. Would someone who genuinely did not know this story care what happens next after reading this? Yes. The chapter ends right as the demon is launching an attack on Duncan, and Kadim is preparing a counter throw. The viewer wants to see if Kadim can save his guide and light source while his blood berserker buff is rapidly ticking down. 2. Did I make the viewer feel something real at least twice in this batch? Yes. First, during Kadim's quiet, internal monologue, where he realizes his long grind to return to reality has completely rotted his own human empathy, making him less human than a fictional merchant. Second, during the high-tension, dual-wielding fight sequence, where the stakes escalate as the demon starts evolving into a mid-tier threat. 3. Are there at least 2 questions still open when the batch ends? Yes. First, can Kadim finish off this evolving intermediate demon before his spoiled goblin blood buff runs out? Second, once this fight is over, will Kadim find the other sacrificed children of the village alive? Or has the demon already consumed them? We pick up right in the middle of the boss room. The red demon realizes its direct attack failed, so it attempts an instant aggro swap, leaping toward our human flashlight, Duncan. But Kadim's battle IQ is way too high for a basic pathfinding trick. He tightens his grip on the hand axe, instantly reading the demon's trajectory. He executes a massive, downward AoE slam, directly into the cave floor. The force of the impact completely shatters the stone stalagmites, leaving the demon suspended in midair, with 0 options. The shockwave travels up the cavern, blinding the entire room with a massive cloud of dust and debris. Duncan and the remaining goblins are completely thrown off, coughing in the dark. The demon is caught in the falling rock slide, its landing completely ruined. But before the dust can even settle, the demon tries to rub its eyes, growling about the dirt. And then, a crimson glow cuts through the fog. Kadim closes the distance instantly. He drives his steel blade straight through the demon's face. The monster lets out a high-pitched screech of pure agony. Kadim smiles, noting that the demon looks much better with some steel in its mouth. The demon tries to claw at him, screaming that it is going to murder him. But our guy is completely unfazed. He realizes intermediate demons have ridiculous HP pools. Even a sword through the brain is not an instant kill. So, he decides to play a little rougher. He grips the hilt with both hands and twists the blade, tearing through flesh and bone. He performs a clean, horizontal rip, letting the gravity of the demon's falling body do the rest of the work. The mutant's skull is completely split open in a massive spray of dark blood. The body crashes into the dirt like a bag of rocks. Kadim's red eyes slowly return to normal as the berserker steam evaporates from his skin. He lets out a long sigh of relief. That was way too close. If his buff had run out even 5 seconds earlier, he would have been fighting an intermediate demon with level 1 base stats. Suddenly, he hears a soft whimper from the corner. The remaining goblins are shivering, dropping their weapons in absolute terror. Now that their master is dead, the demonic mind control is completely gone. They are back to being cowardly, low-level trash mobs. But Kadim is not taking any chances. He swings his sword and clean sweeps the room. Once a creature has tasted human blood, it is a permanent threat. He is clearing the entire lobby before they leave. The last few goblins try to run, screaming in fear, but Kadim is already behind them, leaving no witnesses. He spots the absolute last goblin, which is currently holding the secondary torch. He raises his sword, preparing to deliver the final strike, when Duncan suddenly lets out a terrified scream. The merchant yells for him to stop. Kadim's eyes flash with sudden hostility. His blade stops millimeter away from Duncan's sweating neck. The merchant is trembling so hard, he is practically crying. Our guy slowly lowers the blade, realizing he almost executed his only guide due to the lingering bloodlust. A cold drop of sweat rolls down Kadim's cheek. The mental corruption is starting to leak into his split-second decision-making. Duncan looks at him, completely pale, asking if he is all right. Kadim quickly brushes it off, blaming the dark cave. He tells Duncan the kidnapped kids should be deeper inside, so they need to gather them and get out of this place. The merchant nods quickly, eager to get as far away from Kadim's sword as possible. They walk into the dark tunnels, Kadim dragging the demon's heavy carcass behind him like a sack of groceries. The next morning, the sun is shining as they walk back into the pioneer settlement. The entire village is in absolute tears. Parents are throwing themselves on the ground, hugging their returned children, thanking their god Elga for this miracle. They crowd around Kadim, praising him as a heroic savior. An elderly woman grabs his hand with tears in her eyes, offering him a hot bowl of chicken and barley stew. But Kadim flatly rejects her, telling her to feed the children instead. They are the ones who spent the night crying in a dark cave, without any food. He tells Duncan to go eat with them, stating that he needs to rest alone first. He turns his back on the celebration, walking away. Duncan watches him leave, but his attention is quickly caught by one of the rescued kids. The boy has a vacant, completely empty look in his eyes. The merchant's blood runs cold as he listens to what the kids are actually whispering. They are huddled in a circle, blankly chanting some bizarre, dark spell about rifts, Gehenna, and man's ruin. Kadim walks past, calmly explaining that the children have been deeply brainwashed. The demon did not just keep them as hostages, it forced them to repeat that their parents abandoned them, that they are completely useless, and that the world hates them, until their tiny minds completely broke. He points out that you cannot even call it a lie. Their parents did abandon them. The demon just made sure they would never be able to forget that trauma. Duncan is completely horrified, asking why a demon would do something so unbelievably cruel to innocent kids. Kadim looks at him with empty eyes, stating that this is simply what demons do. Human despair is their ultimate source of nourishment. The merchant stands there, completely speechless. He finally understands why Kadim said a more cunning demon would keep the children alive. A dead child produces no despair. Duncan desperately asks if there is any hope. If the parents show absolute sincerity and care, can the children eventually heal? Our guy looks away, his voice flat. He doubts that parents who threw their kids to a monster to save their own skin are capable of that kind of unconditional love. Duncan looks down, the reality of this dark world crashing over him. He turns back to the village, his heart heavy. He watches the blank-faced children, realizing they will carry these scars for the rest of their lives. Later that afternoon, Duncan is frantically packing his massive red backpack, asking if they are really leaving already. He begs Kadim to rest for at least one day, pointing out that his physical body has not fully healed from the fight. But Kadim tells him no. A witness to their first battle has likely reached the local capital by now. The Empire might overlook a few dead slave guards, but a dead holy knight is a direct declaration of war against the state. If they are unlucky, an elite tracking unit is already hot on their heels. And indeed, cut back to the original massacre site, where crows are circling. Lady Helia is standing over Linton's pinned corpse, her emerald eyes cold and completely focused. We open chapter 10 with a wet, squelching sound. Kadim is currently using his dagger to drain the fresh, dark blood from the dead mutant demon's neck. The village men are standing in the background, looking completely uncomfortable. Kadim fills his leather flask about halfway. It is not a full charge, but it is more than enough to act as an emergency backup buff. He tosses the mutilated carcass onto the dirt. The chief slowly steps forward, nervously asking what he plans to do with the demon's remaining body parts. Our guy casually tells them to build a fire and burn it immediately. The chief's jaw drops. He looks at his men, completely shocked that this mercenary is throwing away an incredibly valuable corpse. In this world, high-level demon parts can fetch a massive price on the black market or from imperial researchers. The chief secretly plots to hide the body and sell it later to secure a small fortune. But Kadim reads his greedy thoughts instantly. He warns the chief that if they do not burn the body, the strong scent of demon blood will attract every wild beast in the forest, and once they devour the flesh, they will turn into mutated monsters. He asks if the village really wants to deal with another horde of rabid goblins next week. The chief's face goes completely pale. The greed evaporates instantly. They quickly drag the heavy carcass away, preparing to burn it. As Kadim turns to leave, Lini's mother runs up to him. She holds out a simple wooden tray containing a pair of thick leather traveler's boots and a sturdy leather belt. It is the best gear the poor village could scrape together. She begs him to accept them as a token of their gratitude. Kadim nods, pulling on the boots and buckling the thick leather belt. He adjusts the fit, noting that this is a decent early game upgrade. He tells Duncan they are moving out. But as he takes a step forward, a sudden, sharp spasm of pain shoots through his chest. He lets out a quiet groan. He touches his chest. The fresh wound he got from the demon yesterday is already scabbed over, thanks to his high recovery stats. And yet, the cross-shaped wound from Linton's holy spear is still bleeding and burning after 10 days. He realizes Linton's blessed weapon was no ordinary spear. It carried a permanent, holy anti-demon consecration. Since Kadim's class relies on demon blood, the holy magic is acting like a permanent poison in his system, preventing his body from regenerating. Cut back to the dark fields, where Linton's spear is still planted in the dirt. Lady Helia is pacing around the clearing. Her subordinate, Edan, walks up, reporting that they have searched the entire perimeter but found absolutely no physical clues. Helia let out a heavy sigh, calling him completely pathetic. She tells him to look at the environmental storytelling. The culprit slaughtered the prisoners too, meaning it was not a rescue mission. None of the expensive armor or weapons were stolen, meaning it was not a robbery. And the demon parts in the wagon were mutilated. Edan stands there, completely out of his depth, asking if she has any idea who could have done this. Helia snaps, calling him an absolute imbecile. She is telling him to find the clues based on those exact deductions. She berates him, pointing out that there is a very clear reason he is still a low-ranking paladin while she is a commander. Edan quietly seethes inside his helmet, thinking she is incredibly arrogant, but he cannot argue because of her ridiculous standing. And honestly, he has a point. Helia is not just any arch-paladin. She is the youngest arch-paladin in the Empire's history, having secured her rank by single-handedly subjugating 20 high-level demons. Her personality is absolute garbage, but her combat stats are the real deal. She looks out over the field, her expression cold and analytical. Edan realizes she is not someone a mere paladin like him can take on, so he swallows his pride. Helia sighs, deciding to stop playing nice. She orders Edan to bring out the holy relic that Archbishop Arensko gave them before they left. Edan gasps in shock, asking if she really means Damien's twin mirrors. He begs her to reconsider, pointing out how risky it is. Here is the lore on this item. Damien's twin mirrors are a legendary holy relic, capable of projecting scenes from the future and the past. However, the future-predicting mirror shattered years ago after attempting to reflect an impossibly powerful entity. Now, only the past-reflecting mirror remains. Helia yells at him, pointing out that the relic was given to them specifically to solve dead ends. She asks if Edan wants to go back and explain to the Archbishop why his favorite nephew, Linton, is dead. She tells him to stop worrying like a coward. Unless the mirror tries to project a great demon-class entity, there is absolutely zero chance of it breaking. Edan reluctantly hand over the golden, star-shaped mirror. Helia kneels in the dirt, holding the relic over Linton's bloodstains. She begins to channel her holy mana, and the mirror lets out a brilliant, blinding flash of white light. A massive, glowing projection rises into the sky. The relic begins playing back the past, showing Kadim's giant silhouette downing the goblin's blood. Edan is completely horrified, muttering about the sacrilege of a human consuming demon fluids. The projection shows Kadim driving the spear through Linton's chest. Helia gasps, her emerald eyes wide with shock. But then, something insane happens. The projected image of Kadim suddenly turns, looking directly at the mirror with glowing red eyes. The intense pressure of his gaze feedback loops into the relic. The glass cracks, and the golden star-shaped mirror violently explodes into thousands of tiny shards. Edan is completely frozen, stuttering that the holy mirror just broke. Helia stares at the shattered pieces in absolute silence. The holy security system only breaks if it tries to process a being on par with a great demon. This means the barbarian slave they are hunting has the soul or power of a literal god-tier threat. Edan begins to pray, terrified, suggesting they return to the holy capital immediately to report this to the High Council. But Helia's expression turns incredibly dark. A cold, bloodthirsty smile spreads across her lips. She tells him they are continuing the search. She rests her hand on the hilt of her sword, drawing the blade. She declares that she is going to personally hunt down and execute this fiend in human skin with her own hands. Meanwhile, miles away, the moon is rising over a quiet river. Duncan is kneeling by the water, looking at his reflection. He is deeply depressed, thinking about his own kid back home and the hollow, broken eyes of the village children. He shakes his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He dips his flask into the water, telling himself he needs to cheer up. If he wants to survive and return to his family, he cannot let his guard down around the barbarian. He walks back to the camp, where the fire is crackling. He calls out to Kadim, offering to cook some hot food, but notices the giant is already lying on the hide blanket. He walks closer, his eyes widening. Kadim is shivering violently, cold sweat dripping off his forehead. Duncan panics, asking what is wrong. He runs over, stammering that a guy who can tear a mutant demon to shreds should not be collapsing like this. He gasps as he sees the cross-shaped scar on Kadim's chest. It is actively bleeding, turning dark and necrotic. Kadim grits his teeth, realizing he made a massive tactical error. The holy blessing on Linton's spear was designed specifically to inflict fatal, non-healing wounds on demonic entities. Since our guy is a berserker who relies on consuming demon blood, his body is currently reacting to the holy magic like a high-grade poison. Duncan cries, wishing they had stayed in the village to rest. But Kadim tells him this is not a wound that can be healed by sleeping. He looks up at Duncan, weakly asking what the moon looked like yesterday. Duncan is confused, but answers that it was a fully tilted waning crescent. Kadim let out a quiet sigh. His timing is still good. Suddenly, a low, guttural howl cuts through the quiet night sky. Duncan leaps in panic, looking around. More growls echo from the thick brush. Dozens of yellow, glowing eyes emerge from the dark tree line. A massive, furred claw steps onto the dirt. Duncan's face goes completely pale as he identifies them. It is a pack of wild blade wolves. Kadim lets out a heavy breath. He slowly reaches down, gripping the handles of his hand axe and sword. He struggles to his feet, shielding the merchant, ordering him to get back. He looks at the approaching predators, cursing his luck. The massive pack of wolves bared their fangs, saliva dripping as they prepare to lunge. Kadim raises his weapons, his expression dark. He tells the wild mutts they could have picked a significantly better time to drop by for dinner. Hashtag Section C. The 3-question continuity check 1. Would someone who genuinely did not know this story care what happens next after reading this? Yes. Kadim is currently suffering from a severe holy poison debuff that prevents his body from regenerating, and he is about to fight a massive pack of wild blade wolves while physically weakened. Additionally, Lady Helia now knows his exact face and is actively hunting him down. 2. Did I make the viewer feel something real at least twice in this batch? Yes. First, during the tragic explanation in Chapter 9 of the children's brainwashing, where Kadim's blunt, painful pragmatism forces Duncan to confront the cold, unyielding nature of demons. Second, during Kadim's physical collapse in Chapter 10, where his godlike facade breaks down, revealing his vulnerability under the Holy Spear's curse. 3. Are there at least 2 questions still open when the batch ends? Yes. First, why did Kadim's image shatter a sacred holy relic? Is his soul carrying some fragment of the original great demon? Second, how will Kadim and Duncan survive a pack of wild blade wolves in his current poisoned state without a fresh supply of demon blood? We start off Chapter 11 with the absolute worst-case scenario. The local wildlife has officially decided that our guys are on the menu. Our guy Kadim is sweating buckets, breathing heavy, and looking like a man who is currently holding his entire respiratory system together by sheer willpower. The wolves have surrounded the camp in a tight circle, moving with the kind of coordinated pack logic that tells you these things do not just hunt for fun. They are looking at him like a very large, very broken steak. And we do not even have time to negotiate. The first wolf lunges right out of the dark, jaws wide, looking to end this before it even starts. Kadim does not panic. He brings the hand axe down in a clean, vertical arc, the weight of his swing cutting through the cold night air. It hits hard. The blade buries itself straight into the wolf's skull with a sickening crunch. He throws the beast back into the dirt, but there is a problem. The hand axe is completely wedged in the bone. It is gone. Kadim is furious. His vision is blurring from the poison, and his hand-eye coordination is officially in the dumpster. He was aiming right between the eyes, but missed his mark just enough to lose his secondary weapon. And the wolves do not wait for you to retrieve your looted gear. 2 more launch themselves straight at his throat. He draws his standard iron sword, getting into a low stance. This is all he has left, and his health bar is flashing red. He swings, the blade tracing a red line through the dark as it bites into the first wolf's neck. He pivots instantly, cutting the second one midair, but his movements are heavy. He is fighting underwater here, and because he is slow, one of the beasts manages to sink its fangs straight into his left forearm. Our guy just grunts. He has spent 50 years getting chewed on by actual dragons, so a wild dog is barely a minor inconvenience. He grabs the wolf by the throat, holding it steady, and delivers a massive right hook straight to its temple. You can see the absolute desperation in his eyes. He is running on pure, unfiltered adrenaline and spite right now. He slams the wolf into the dirt, using its own body mass as a shield against the rest of the pack. The impact shakes the ground, but his chest wound is smoking. The necrotic holy poison is flaring up again. He spits a curse. This is bad. His body is physically rejecting his own survival instincts. He drives his blade through the wolf's throat, finishing it off, but the effort leaves him gasping for air. He stands over the pile of dead wolves, but the forest is not getting any quieter. The rest of the pack slowly creeps forward. They are not stupid. They are letting the poison do the heavy lifting for them. Kadim is analyzing the situation, and the math is not mathing. They hunt in tight formations, they are patient, and there are simply too many of them for his level 1 stats to handle while he is actively dying. Suddenly, Duncan starts screaming. The merchant is waving a pair of burning sticks wildly at the campfire, looking like a very stressed out mascot, trying to keep 2 massive predators from turning his red backpack into a chew toy. Kadim reaches for his belt. He pulls out the leather flask containing the mutant demon's blood. In his current poisoned state, Drinking this is basically equivalent to chugging a bottle of bleach, but he does not have a choice. The wolves get closer to Duncan, tasting the absolute panic in the air. Our guy pops the cork and downs the entire flask in one go. He drops the empty container, and the transformation hits him instantly. The blood berserker aura erupts around him in a massive wave of dark, crimson mana. The physical pressure in the clearing shifts so fast that the leaves on the trees actually stop moving. The wolves near Duncan freeze. They look back, their instincts instantly screaming that the dying barbarian they were hunting has just been replaced by something that eats nightmares for breakfast. Kadim's eyes flash a brilliant, glowing red. The sanity-rotting grind is back on the menu. He moves like a blur. The first wolf does not even register that he crossed the clearing before its head is spinning through the air. The other two wolves near Duncan do not even have time to turn around. He cuts through them in a single, sweeping motion. Duncan is completely frozen, his jaw practically touching the dirt. He is realizing that his terrifying travel companion is somehow even more dangerous than he previously thought. The blood sprays across the grass, but Kadim does not stop to enjoy the scenery. He is a one-man meat grinder, spinning through the pack with absolute mechanical efficiency. And while he is slaughtering them, he is calmly analyzing his stats. The Blood Berserker buff changes its primary attribute depending on whose blood you actually drink. The wolves try to regroup, but they are too slow. Our guy's focus is locked in. He moves with a level of speed that does not make physical sense for his massive frame. This is the agility enhancement. He realizes that because he drank the blood of that fast mutant red demon from the cave, his strength did not go up. His speed did. The author is actually keeping the power system consistent, which is a welcome surprise. The surviving wolves realize they are completely outmatched and start sprinting back into the brush. Duncan points his torch, shouting that they are actually running away. He thinks they won, but Kadim's expression goes cold. Predators do not run away from an easy meal unless something much larger has just stepped into their territory. And right on cue, a massive paw slams into the dirt. The ground literally shakes. The crimson aura around Kadim flickers as the wind kicks up. Out of the shadows steps the alpha. This thing is covered in old scars, with pale fur and glowing yellow eyes that look far too intelligent for a common beast. Duncan stammers, pointing out that this one is easily twice the size of the others. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Kadim's sweat starts cold. This is the pack leader, and the timing could not be worse. The blood buff is about to run out. The red glow fades from his eyes, and the sudden crash of his stats hits him like a freight train. The giant wolf launches itself forward, slamming its massive weight straight into Kadim's defensive block. The sheer force of the impact starts driving him into the dirt. He is holding the blade with both hands, but his muscles are screaming. Then, his chest wound flares with a blinding, white-hot agony. The necrotic poison has chosen this exact millisecond to reach his heart. He coughs up a spray of dark blood, his grip slipping from the hilt. He drops to one knee, clutching his chest. He is completely defenseless, and the giant alpha is towering right over him. Duncan is screaming his head off, completely panicking as he watches his only source of security collapse. But instead of running, the brave little merchant actually steps in, waving his torch wildly to keep the massive beast from snapping Kadim in half. Kadim is gasping for air, the black smoke of the holy poison visibly rising from his chest. This is the end of the line, unless the wolf growls, its yellow eyes locked onto the shivering merchant who is currently standing between it and its target. But Kadim is not looking at the wolf. He is looking up at the sky. He is tracking something. He asks himself if the conditions have been met yet. And then, his eyes go wide. His pupil shifts, turning into a gold concentric ring. It is here. The clock has officially struck 12. It is midnight, on the exact night when the moon is completely hidden from the world. He drives his iron sword straight into the ground. He closes his eyes and begins to chant an ancient, forgotten prayer. He is calling upon Atala, the undefeated master of 10,000 soldiers, to place a blade in his hands. Duncan is looking at him like he has completely lost his mind. There is a giant wolf about to eat them, and this man has decided to start a poetry reading. Kadim presses the hilt of the sword to his forehead, his voice echoing through the clearing. He is bestowing a blood-soaked name upon the steel, under the cover of the moonless sky. And then, a massive pillar of golden and red flame erupts straight from his body, lighting up the entire forest like a second sun. The giant alpha wolf yelps, backing away in absolute confusion. It has never seen a human turn into a literal campfire before. Duncan covers his eyes, completely blinded by the sudden explosion of holy and demonic energy. The fire swirls around Kadim, the heat cracking the dry dirt beneath his boots. A giant, glowing golden system prompt appears in the air before him, asking a single question: what name will you give this sword? Kadim feels the familiar vibration of the system's will traveling up his arms. This is his legacy trait, the one he used to conquer the game in his first life. He looks at the glowing screen, his mouth curving into a highly disrespectful, chaotic smirk. The name he chooses is Mosquito. The sword starts to violently absorb the swirling flames, the metal glowing white hot as the system processes the command. A red star flashes at the center of the blade, and a glowing, crimson glyph, shaped like a stylized letter M, is permanently etched into the steel. The system screen updates, confirming his unique legacy trait, the one who bestows names. Our guy is officially back in business. Hashtag Chapter 12. We open Chapter 12 with Kadim holding his newly branded sword, Mosquito. The weapon is humming with a faint, dark crimson light. The red glyph on the blade flashes, and you can practically hear the system's database sweating from the sheer disrespect of naming a divine fire weapon after a common pest. The giant alpha wolf does not care about the naming conventions. It lunges forward, aiming to crush him with its massive weight. The dust explodes outward as the beast lands, obscuring the entire clearing in a cloud of gray dirt. Duncan screams, thinking his terrifying barbarian friend has finally been turned into wolf paste. But Kadim is already behind the beast. He executed a blinding, high-speed dash, his blade leaving a glowing trail of red vapor in the air. He lands cleanly on his feet, sheathing his sword as the giant wolf frozen in place behind him. The system notification pops up. Special effect activated. A stream of dark, misty red energy rises from the wolf's fresh wound, traveling through the air and entering Kadim's hand. And there is the payoff. Vampirism. The system confirms his health is being restored. Kadim looks down at his chest as the dark, smoking holy poison starts to dissipate. He actually feels like he might survive the night. The giant alpha is still standing, but it is bleeding heavily, its yellow eyes wide with a very human kind of horror. Our guy looks back over his shoulder, giving the beast a cold, predatory smile. He asks if it wants to go another round, calling it exactly what you think he did. The wolf charges one last time, desperate to take him down with it. But Kadim just steps inside its guard and drives the sword straight down through its skull. The giant beast crashes to the dirt, dead before it even hits the grass. Kadim stands over it, the red mist of mosquito still swirling around his arms. The system notifications flood his vision. All wounds have been healed. He looks down at his chest. The cross-shaped scar from Linton's holy spear, the necrotic wound that has been slowly killing him for 3 chapters, is completely gone. The skin is as smooth as if he had never met a holy knight in his life. He looks around at the pile of dead wolves, realizing that the forest ambush was actually the best thing that could have happened to him. The game's balance system is weeping. He examines the blade, noting that the ancient glyph probably translates to mosquito. Vampirism allows him to steal life force every time he deals damage to a living target, but he is still a realist. The sword is low grade, meaning the conversion rate is terrible. To heal another fatal wound like that, he would need to slaughter an entire zoo, and the trait is completely useless against targets without blood, like skeletons or golems. He sighs, letting his shoulders drop. It is enough for now. The massive advantage is that he can grant these special effects without using any raw materials, and if he meets the right conditions on another moonless night, he can do it again to a different weapon. He sheathes the blade. Expecting too much from the start is a fast track to getting yourself killed. That is a lesson he learned from his first 50-year playthrough. Duncan slowly peeks out from behind a tree, looking like a man who is not entirely sure if he is allowed to keep living. He walks over, stepping over the carcass of the giant alpha. He is completely baffled. The barbarian was a walking corpse 5 minutes ago, so seeing him stand there looking perfectly healthy is breaking his brain. He stammers, pointing at Kadim's clean chest, asking how on earth a necrotic holy wound from an arch-paladin's spear could just disappear. Kadim ignores the question, looking at him with those cold, calculating eyes. He asks why the merchant didn't run away. Duncan is caught completely off guard. Kadim points out that if Duncan had left him to die while he was weakened by the poison, there is no way a level 1 barbarian could have chased him down. It was his perfect chance to escape. Duncan processes the logic, touching his chin as his face goes through 3 different stages of realization. Our guy smirks. He tells the merchant that even if he had run, the wolves would have caught him anyway, meaning his survival depended on the barbarian staying alive. Duncan quickly waves his hands, denying it. But in his head, Duncan is having a mini existential crisis. He is realizing that he was so genuinely worried about the injured barbarian that he didn't even think about saving his own skin. That is real companion growth, right there. Kadim turns his back, walking towards his bedroll. He orders the merchant to keep watch while he gets some sleep. But before he lies down, he looks back with a grin that would make a demon look friendly. He tells Duncan that if he decides to run while he is asleep, he better run to the ends of the earth, because if he catches him, he will pull his intestines out and use them as a skipping rope. Duncan shivers, the metaphorical lightning cracking behind his head. He is realizing that the barbarian's sense of humor is incredibly dark, and there is a 99% chance he is not joking. So we cut to Duncan sitting by the fire, crying tiny, dramatic tears as he holds his knees. The average customer service job is less stressful than this. The next morning, the sun is shining, and Duncan is back to his professional merchant mode, hoisting his massive red backpack. They are walking along a beautiful, winding river valley. Duncan points at his map, explaining that they have about 10 more days of marching before they reach the border of the Free Cities Alliance. The Southern Empire territory is massive, so the detour is taking forever. Kadim matches his pace, He notes that he would highly prefer not to run into another holy knight if they can help it. One spear to the chest was more than enough. Duncan agrees, pointing out that this specific route is poorly guarded. The only real risk out here is running into wilderness bandits. But he looks up at the massive barbarian walking next to him, realizing that to normal humans, this guy is basically a natural disaster on legs. Bandits are not a threat to Kadim. They are a delivery service for free loot. Duncan explains that there is a small, remote settlement called Multana Castle on the way where they can restock their food. The state religion's influence doesn't reach that far out, and once they hit the Alliance territory, the roads are beautifully maintained because of the commercial trade. He points to a trail on the parchment. If they follow this shortcut, they will hit the Golden Road, which leads directly to Vistana in no time. Kadim looks at the mountains. It is a long journey, but compared to his first playthrough, this is basically a luxury vacation. We see a flashback panel of knights clashing in a gray wasteland. 300 years ago, before the Empire conquered everything, the Eastern continent was a chaotic mess of warring duchies and small kingdoms. Nobody welcomed outsiders, and a younger, hooded Kadim is shown walking through a crowd of highly suspicious civilians, especially a massive, weapon-carrying barbarian who looked like he could level a tavern by sneezing. And then we get a flashback of Melissa. She is looking at him with the most bored, unimpressed expression you have ever seen on a red-headed mage. He remembers how she treated him like a bug when they first met. We see her pouting while writing in her massive magic research book. The translation shows her notes: a Talon barbarian from the wastelands. Copper skin. Super tall, like an ogre, possibly a criminal or a slave trader. Caution advised. Kadim's first party was not built on instant friendship. It was built on mutual suspicion and comedy. A small, genuine smile touches Kadim's mouth. He calls it a useless memory, but the viewer knows exactly why he is heading to Vistana. He wants to see what his hot-headed friend left behind. Duncan interrupts his thoughts, noting that the modern alliance is much friendlier to foreigners, so he won't have to worry about getting chased out. Suddenly, they hear shouting from the woods ahead. Down the path, a group of armed bandits are gathered under a tree, arguing loudly amongst themselves. Kadim stops, asking the merchant what he thinks is going on over there. Duncan peeks through the brush. He notes that they look like bandits, but they are currently arguing with another group that seems much more organized. Our guy is not interested in side quests. He tells the merchant that nothing good comes from getting involved in local drama and turns to take another path. But of course, the universe has other plans. One of the bandits turns his head, locks eyes with the massive barbarian, and points directly at him with a look of pure shock. Kadim stops, his eye twitching. This is going to be incredibly annoying. The bandits start running towards them, their boots kicking up dust. Kadim calmly draws his sword and hand axe, preparing to turn this path into a slaughterhouse. He steps in front of Duncan, his posture shifting into a combat stance. He looks at them with the kind of cold, dead gaze that usually precedes a double-digit body count. But as the lead bandit gets closer, his face completely twists into giant, teary anime eyes of absolute joy. He looks like he just found his missing dog. The bandit stops and starts clapping his hands together, practically crying. The rest of the bandit crew runs over, laughing and celebrating around a completely confused Kadim. They are shouting at their rivals, bragging that their heavy hitter has finally arrived, and asking who is laughing now. The rival group of bandits looks at Kadim's massive, scarred frame, instantly loses all their confidence, and starts running away down the road. The bandit boss laughs hysterically, yelling at them to run back and tell their leader that Aegon's raging horn has arrived. Kadim is standing there, with his weapons drawn, completely lost in the sauce. He looks down at the laughing boss, his voice dropping into a register that makes the grass freeze. He asks them, very slowly, what they think they are doing. The boss just smiles, thanking him for showing up to help, and asks if he should address him by his barbarian name. Kadim sighs, closing his eyes. He explains, very clearly, that he is not their missing champion. He has a border to cross, and if they do not get out of his way, he will make sure they never have to worry about their rivals again. The bandits freeze. The silence in the clearing is absolute. The bald bandit and the boss just stare at him for a long, incredibly awkward 3 seconds. And then, the boss's hand slowly starts sliding down to the dagger at his belt. He draws the blade, his face instantly twisting into an ugly, furious snarl. He demands to know who the hell this random barbarian is to show up and ruin their perfect bluff. Duncan screams in terror as the entire squad draws their weapons, while Kadim just continues to stare at them with the most bored, unimpressed eyes you have ever seen. They have no idea who they just pulled a knife on. We pick up right where we left off with these frontier bandits, realizing they made a massive mistake. The moment they realize our guy isn't their legendary savior, their boss instantly pulls a dagger and starts screaming about his damaged feelings. Kadim is just standing there, looking completely unimpressed. He is internally running the numbers on this guy's life expectancy, realizing these bandits actually think having more warm bodies gives them the upper hand. The bald bandit with the scar on his head spots Duncan hiding in the back. He immediately zeroes in on the merchant's ridiculously oversized red backpack, thinking they just hit a jackpot. He reaches out, telling Duncan to bring the bag over so they can see what kind of expensive loot is inside. Duncan is sweating bullets, looking like a horror game protagonist who just walked into a dead end. The bandit insists he won't eat him, but before his hand can even touch the strap, a massive shadow looms directly over him. Our guy steps in. He doesn't say a word, just towers over the bald bandit like a brick wall that has decided to take offense at his existence. The bandit boss tries to salvage his pride, telling Kadim that he is making them sad by acting so hostile. He claims that because of Kadim's little trick, they have to fight their rivals without any reinforcements, so they deserve some financial compensation. Kadim's expression goes deadpan. The boss realizes he isn't getting a single copper out of those pockets, so he decides to switch tactics. He suggests that since Kadim looks like he can handle himself, he should join them and fight their rivals while pretending to be the legendary Aegon's Raging Horn. The rest of the crew thinks this is a brilliant business strategy. The boss even starts doing a pathetic demonstration, flexing his non-existent muscles and screaming like a low-budget barbarian to show how easy it is to scam people. Kadim is just standing behind him, watching this absolute circus. He tells Kadim that if he does this, they can call it even, and they won't even steal Duncan's bag. He finishes his little speech with a highly vulgar phrase about taking responsibility like a real man. He leans in close, asking if Kadim is actually a woman under all those muscles, because he is being so quiet, mockingly offering to apologize if he was being rude. The entire bandit squad starts laughing hysterically, kikiing like a bunch of schoolyard bullies who think the big quiet kid is too scared to say a single word. Duncan is watching from the back, feeling incredibly stressed because he knows exactly what happens when people mistake Kadim's silence for weakness. He wonders if Kadim is just trying to avoid getting tangled up with local trash. The boss decides the deal is sealed and reaches out to tap Kadim's massive chest, thinking they are officially partners. Kadim's eyes go cold. The dead look is back. The boss smiles, telling him that since they are partners now, they should introduce themselves. Kadim replies that he will gladly tell them his name. The steel splits the air. Before the boss can even finish his smile, Kadim's sword is already moving. It is a clean, horizontal flash of metal. And just like that, the boss's head is rolling across the dirt like a dropped watermelon. No dramatic speech, no mid-fight struggle, just instant retirement. The remaining bandits freeze, their expressions instantly shifting from arrogant laughter to absolute mind-numbing terror. The hooded bandit lets out a throat-shredding scream of pure panic. Duncan is standing in the back with a tired, resigned face, thinking that this is exactly how he expected this encounter to end. The bandits are screaming that Horsel is dead, completely losing their minds. The hooded bandit tries to raise his spear, screaming at Kadim and asking if he has any idea who he just messed with. He declares that our guy won't leave this forest alive. Kadim stands calmly, his sword dripping with fresh blood. He introduces himself simply as Kadim, the great warrior of Atala. We cut to a peaceful shot of a yellow butterfly resting on a wooden post. It is a beautiful, serene moment in nature. The post is actually the handle of Kadim's chipped old hand axe, and the butterfly is quickly displaced as Kadim's hand grips the wood. He swings the axe down, burying it straight into the skull of the bald bandit who tried to touch Duncan's bag. The fight is already over, and the road is covered in fresh bodies. Kadim pulls his hand axe out of the skull, examining the metal with a critical eye. He notes that the weapon is in terrible shape. The edge is chipped, the joint is loose, and the metal is rattling against the wood. He admits he has been far too rough with a tool that was never meant for high-level combat. He decides he needs to look for a decent replacement once they stop by a major castle. He sheathes his sword and turns around, where the last surviving bandit is gasping for air on the ground. The hooded bandit is shaking violently, naming his dead companions and realizing he is the last survivor of a squad that got wiped out in about 40 seconds. Kadim looks down at him, his gaze completely devoid of empathy. The bandit screams, frantically trying to scramble backward into the dirt, but his boot catches on a tree root, and he faceplants hard into the dirt, letting out a pathetic groan. Kadim steps on his back, pinning him to the ground with his heavy boot. He tells him to look on the bright side. He no longer has to worry about losing his ankles, and Kadim doesn't need to waste any energy pulling his axe out again. He applies a bit of pressure, calmly explaining that if the bandit doesn't want his spine crushed into powder, he better answer every single question he is asked. The bandit screams in agony. Kadim asks if they are indeed bandits, what their relationship is with the two who ran away earlier, and who exactly is this Aegon's Raging Horn character. The bandit groans under his boot, realizing his survival depends entirely on his cooperation. Duncan steps forward, adjusting his massive backpack. He explains that Aegon is a major city located in the center of the Free Cities Alliance. He adds that Aegon houses the largest gladiator arena on the entire continent, where mercenaries and wanderers gather to seek wealth. Aegon's Raging Horn is a legendary barbarian gladiator who won the championship multiple times. Kadim connects the dots, realizing these low-level highwaymen simply saw a massive barbarian and assumed he was the famous champion. Duncan notes that the theory is highly flawed. Aegon's Raging Horn is such a high-tier figure that even city chairmen can't meet him easily. Even if you paid him a fortune, there is no way a legendary champion would come to a backwater frontier like this. The pinned bandit spits blood, yelling that his boss, Graham, is also a former arena fighter, and claimed that they have been best friends since their gladiator days. He says Graham promised that if he asked for help, the champion would drop everything and come immediately. The bandit screams that once Aegon's raging horn actually gets here, Kadim and his merchant friend are dead meat. He explains that their territory was recently seized by a rival group called the Black Hammer Gang, which is why their boss reached out to his legendary best friend for help. Duncan looks down at him with a face full of pity. He tells the bandit, very gently, that his boss has completely scammed him. Duncan points out the obvious flaw. If Graham was really best friends with a wealthy arena champion, why is he living in a damp cave, running a third-rate bandit crew? The champion could have easily tossed him a few gold bars to open a decent tavern in a safe city. The bandit goes completely silent as the logic hits his brain. He stammers, realizing his entire gang might have been fighting a war based on a complete lie told by their boss to save face. Kadim processes the information. He notes that regardless of the circumstances, he has already slaughtered several members of the Black Hammer Gang, meaning they won't just let the matter slide once they find the bodies. His speedrunner brain takes over. He decides it is significantly better to strike first and wipe them out than to wait around and get ambushed on the road. Plus, since they are bandits, he can loot their supplies and look for a usable weapon without any moral dilemmas. He looks down at the pinned bandit, ordering him to lead them directly to their hideout so he can clean up the remnants of the gang. The bandit tries to refuse, claiming he can't betray his crew. Kadim simply applies a tiny bit more physical pressure to his spine, and the bandit's loyalty instantly evaporates. He starts screaming that he will lead them anywhere they want. We cut to the hideout of the Blood Cave Gang, which is indeed a depressing, dark cave, guarded by two highly bored-looking bandits. Deeper inside the cavern, we find a pathetic excuse for a throne room, featuring a single wooden chair and a dusty red carpet. And sitting on that chair is Graham, the leader of the gang. He has ginger hair, sideburns, a scar on his eye, and looks incredibly depressed. He sighs, muttering to himself that he is Graham, the legendary leader of the Blood Cave Gang, allegedly close friends with Aegon's raging horn. He remembers how he used to boast about his glorious days as a proud, brave gladiator in the prestigious Aegon arena, and then he facepalms hard, admitting that it is all an absolute lie. He was actually a mediocre gladiator who retired with a pathetic record of 1 win and 4 losses. Aegon's raging horn doesn't even know he exists. He groans, admitting he only lied about sending a messenger because his subordinates were constantly pestering him to do something about their rivals. He wonders why a legendary champion would ever come to this dump. He stares at the cave floor, wondering where his life went so spectacularly wrong. He explains that he just wanted to live a simple, comfortable life of minor banditry with a bunch of gullible idiots who believed his exaggerated bluffs. And it would have worked perfectly if the Black Hammer Gang hadn't pushed in and ruined his entire retirement plan. He curses his rivals, wishing that Aegon's raging horn would actually show up to save him. Suddenly, a terrified bandit runs into the cavern, screaming that the champion has actually arrived. Graham jumps up from his throne, completely shocked. The bandit runs toward him, screaming for his life, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated terror. Graham is completely baffled, wondering why his subordinate is screaming for help if their savior has arrived. The bandit's head is suddenly slammed into the stone floor, his skull splitting open under a massive, blood-drenched boot. Out of the darkness of the tunnel steps Kadim. Graham stares in horror at the giant warrior, covered in the blood of his outer guards. He notes the massive physique and the barbarian attire, his brain frantically trying to process if his lie has somehow manifested into reality. He stammers, asking if this is actually Aegon's raging horn. Kadim just offers a casual greeting. Our guy points his blood-soaked sword straight at his face, calmly asking if he is the boss of this pathetic establishment. Graham can only stare, his jaw completely locked in terror, as he realizes this is definitely not his imaginary best friend. Hashtag Chapter 14. We open Chapter 14, with Kadim standing in Graham's throne room, looking like a raid boss who just walked into a low-level starting zone. He repeats his question, asking if Graham is the leader. His presence is completely overwhelming, the dark crimson aura of his class trait subtly flaring around his broad shoulders. Graham is internally panicking. He has actually seen the real Aegon's raging horn in the arena before, so he knows for a fact that this is not the guy. He wonders who this monster in human skin is. He looks down at his dead subordinate on the floor, realizing that everyone he left outside to guard the entrance has already been systematically dismantled. He concludes that even if this man isn't the legendary champion, he is undoubtedly a highly dangerous psychopath who needs to be handled with extreme caution. Graham grunts, slamming his fist onto his stone armrest, trying to look intimidating. He screams a battle cry as he lunges forward. He decides that his only option is to strike first before Kadim can adjust his stance. Kadim doesn't even move his sword. He notes that the man is planning to fight with his bare hands, calling the decision highly interesting. Graham charges with his eyes glowing with reckless fury, bringing his fist forward. But Kadim simply tilts his head, dodging the strike with a fraction of an inch to spare. The motion is so fast that the wind from the dodge kicks up the red carpet beneath their feet, and we get a sudden gear shift. Before Graham's fist can even miss completely, he is already flat on his face, begging for his life on his knees like a professional coward. He screams that he will preemptively get on his knees, offering all the gold and valuables stored in the chest in the corner if Kadim will just spare him. Kadim tells him, very coldly, to stop calling him Big Brother. Duncan watches from the entrance, noting that this is indeed the posture of someone who has mastered the art of begging for survival. He thinks it looks a lot like his own reflection from 2 chapters ago. Graham keeps rambling, offering food and gear from the back of the cave. But then, he looks up and notices Kadim is slowly raising his iron sword. He frantically begs him to reconsider, offering a tribute every time Kadim decides to visit the area. He realizes his words are bouncing off a brick wall. This barbarian is the type who won't listen to anything his prey says. He laments that despite surviving the arena with cheap tricks, he is going to end up as a stain on a cave floor. Then, his eyes catch the chipped, blood-stained hand axe hanging from Kadim's belt. A desperate idea hits his brain. He screams, asking if Kadim would be interested in a treasure map. He explains that the map marks the exact location of a legendary dwarven throwing axe. The word dwarven immediately stops Kadim's hand midair. Graham quickly continues, explaining that it is a master-crafted throwing axe forged with the actual heart and soul of dwarven artisans. Kadim lowers the sword slightly, ordering him to keep talking. Graham is internally celebrating, realizing he has successfully hooked the barbarian's interest. He boasts that dwarven equipment is so rare that it never even appears on the black market. He claims the blade never dulls, no matter how much you use it, and when thrown, it flies like a bird to hit its target entirely on its own. He is laying it on thick, hoping the hype is enough to save his skin. Kadim starts analyzing the item in his head. He knows that dwarven equipment in this RPG world not only possesses broken base stats, but is always preloaded with high-grade special effects. It is impossible to compare them to standard human gear. Here is how the lore of this world actually works. Dwarves and elves exist, but they are highly isolationist minor races who have zero interest in interacting with humanity. Because of that, even mid-tier dwarven equipment that you could easily obtain through standard quests in the game is nearly impossible to find in this reality. There is no way a dwarf who hates humans would willingly sell their masterworks. Kadim concludes that if the bandit's words are true, this is an opportunity he cannot afford to miss. High-performance weapons are absolutely necessary, if only to prevent him from relying too much on his sanity-rotting demon blood. He demands to know where the map is located. Graham gives a slimy smirk, rubbing his hands together, telling Kadim that he needs a solid guarantee for his life before he hands over his only lifeline. Kadim's expression goes dark. He notes that it is highly amusing that a mere bandit thinks he has the leverage to negotiate. The blade moves. Before Graham can even register the shift, Kadim drives the point of his sword straight through his left shoulder. Graham lets out a pathetic screech of agony. Kadim calmly explains that if they are talking about negotiations, he has a few highly effective techniques up his sleeve as well. He tells him, with a very polite smile, that he will simply continue putting holes in his body until he feels like talking, suggesting he try holding out until he resembles a wet rag. Graham is shaking violently, the cold steel in his flesh completely destroying his desire to bargain. He is realizing that this barbarian is a complete psychopath. We cut to the hideout of the rival Black Hammer gang under the cover of night. It is a massive, heavily fortified wooden compound with palisades and guard towers. Inside the compound, 2 bandits are arguing loudly in front of their boss, accusing each other of talking absolute nonsense. The argument is abruptly cut short when a massive concrete warhammer is slammed into the wooden floor, shaking the entire room. Sitting on a large wooden throne is Krevin, the leader of the Black Hammer gang. He is a massive bald man with a scar over his eye, looking incredibly bored. He asks them to repeat what they just said. He demands to know if they are seriously claiming that Aegon's Raging Horn has actually traveled to this frontier to help their pathetic rivals. The 2 subordinates sweat profusely, nod frantically, and confirm that it is indeed the truth. Krevin narrows his eyes, asking if they honestly expect him to believe such a ridiculous story. They plead with him, claiming they saw a barbarian as big as a mountain traveling with the Blood Cave gang. Krevin sits back, analyzing the situation. He knows his subordinates are idiots, but they wouldn't panic like this unless they saw something genuinely terrifying. He remembers the old rumors that Graham and the arena champion were associates, but he quickly dismisses the theory as nonsense. There is no way a legendary champion would move to help a third-rate bandit. He reasons that Graham likely just crossed the border and hired a massive barbarian mercenary to act as a bluff. But he is a veteran fighter, and he knows that underestimating a potential threat is a fast track to a shallow grave. He decides to prepare for the worst. Suddenly, a sentry runs into the hall, screaming that a raid is underway, and the Blood Cave gang is approaching their gates. Krevin stands up, asking how many men are attacking. The sentry replies that there are only 2 people. Their leader, Graham, and a massive barbarian suspected to be Aegon's Raging Horn. The room goes completely chaotic. The bandits are shouting in panic, wondering if the barbarian is so confident in his power that he didn't even bother bringing reinforcements. Krevin's face goes dark. He realizes that if the rumors are true, and this man is a genuine high-tier gladiator, they stand absolutely zero chance in a straight, head-on physical fight. He immediately orders his men to deploy crossbowmen behind the barricades and hide the rest of the squad in the surrounding bushes. He tells them to fire all arrows on his signal, preparing a massive, cowardly bottleneck. He hoists his massive warhammer onto his shoulder, deciding to personally verify the identity of their guest. He walks out into the night, his grip tight on the handle. Meanwhile, along the forest path, Kadim is marching Graham forward. Graham is clutching his bandaged shoulder, looking like he is about to collapse from blood loss. Graham asks if Kadim seriously intends to walk straight into the front gates of the Black Hammer Gang's fortified hideout. Kadim looks down at him, noting that Graham was the one who claimed the dwarven map was hidden in their territory. He asks, with a dangerous edge to his voice, if that was a lie. Graham frantically denies it, explaining that they originally hid the map in their own territory, but since they lost the area to their rivals, the map is now sitting inside the enemy camp. He stammers that they are up against a massive, highly organized bandit gang, so walking in through the front door with only 2 people is suicide. Kadim asks how many fighters are in the gang. Graham quickly claims there are at least 100 cruel, vicious killers, hoping the massive number will convince the barbarian to retreat and bring reinforcements. Kadim processes the number, noting that 100 men is a surprisingly large number for a frontier bandit gang. Graham smiles, thinking his plan worked. But Kadim simply sighs, noting that he might be a bit tired after killing all of them, so they should hurry up. He adds that he wants to get back to camp before sunset so he can get some sleep. The speedrunner grind set is truly terrifying. Graham can only let out a confused squeak. He realizes this man's brain is wired completely differently from a normal human being. They step out of the forest, arriving directly in front of the Black Hammer Gang's compound. And standing at the gates is Kreven, his massive warhammer resting on his shoulder. The 2 leaders lock eyes across the clearing. The physical pressure in the air is immense. Kreven laughs, yelling that he didn't expect Graham to have the balls to show up at his gates, and asks what business brings him here. Graham's cowardice instantly shifts into arrogant posturing the moment he realizes he has a cheat code standing next to him. He screams that he has come to declare the complete downfall of the Black Hammer Gang. He gestures dramatically to Kadim, proudly declaring that his close friend, the legendary gladiator of the Aegon Arena, has arrived to slaughter them all. Kadim just looks at him with a face full of sheer disbelief. The name Aegon's Raging Horn sends a massive wave of panic through Kreven's men, their hands shaking on their bows. Graham is internally celebrating. He thinks his plan is working perfectly. The enemy is shaken, all attention is locked onto the barbarian, and he can easily slip away into the woods while they are fighting frantically. But before he can even take a step back, a massive, heavy hand grabs him by the hair, lifting him off his feet. Kadim lifts the screaming gang leader high into the air with one hand. He projects his voice across the entire clearing, calmly announcing that he is absolutely not Aegon's Raging Horn. He adds that he has zero interest in fighting them, as long as they hand over the item he is looking for. He looks Kreven straight in the eye, noting that there is absolutely no need for them to waste energy shedding blood over a simple misunderstanding. Kreven is completely stunned, but a massive, victorious grin quickly spreads across his scarred face. He chuckles, noting that he knew the rumors were too stupid to be true. And just like that, Graham's perfect escape plan has completely collapsed, leaving our guy face to face with an entire fortress of armed bandits. We start chapter 15, with Kadim immediately ruining his hostage's entire retirement plan. He literally holds Graham by the hair and announces to the entire bandit fortress that he is not their legendary savior. He looks Kreven straight in the eye, calmly suggesting that there is absolutely no reason for them to waste energy shedding blood as long as he gets what he came for. Kreven gives a smug smirk, instantly concluding that Kadim is just a cheap mercenary Graham hired with gold. He figures the barbarian is trying to negotiate because he realizes he just walked into a fatal bottleneck. But deep down, Kreven is still a bit unsettled. He wonders why this man is so incredibly calm if he actually understands the sheer amount of arrows pointed at his skull. He decides he has heard enough. He slams his heavy warhammer into the dirt, signaling his men to take action. Up on the wooden ramparts, the crossbowmen lock their triggers, ready to paint the clearing red. The bandits hiding in the bushes draw their steel, waiting for the command to spring the trap. Kadim and Graham are completely surrounded by a wall of blades, the bandits laughing and mocking them for their stupidity. Kreven plays along, giving a fake friendly smile. He asks the mercenary what exactly he is looking for, offering to have his subordinates help locate it if he cooperates. Kadim doesn't buy the nice guy act for a second. He points his sword, telling Kreven that he is looking for a map, his current hostage knows the location, and all Kreven's men need to do is clear a path. Kreven's eyes widen slightly. A map. He reaches into his vest and pulls out a tattered piece of parchment, waving it with a smug grin. He asks if this is the little drawing they are referring to. Graham's jaw drops, and he starts screaming in disbelief. He has no idea how his rivals managed to locate his most prized possession. Kreven explains, very casually, that his scouts found the map hidden under a random rock on Graham's old territory. He notes that since several high-level groups have been hunting for this paper, whatever is marked on it must be an incredibly valuable treasure. He gives a cruel, taunting smile, asking Kadim if he really walks straight into a fortress just to get his hands on this. Our guy's eyes narrow. The speedrunner is locking onto the objective. And then, Krevin does something completely unhinged. He laughs hysterically and starts ripping the tattered map into pieces. Graham is screaming, asking if the man has completely lost his mind, as the paper is shredded under their noses. But Krevin isn't done. He shoves the torn pieces of the map straight into his mouth. He literally gulps it down, swallowing the entire treasure map in one go, like a man trying to hit his daily fiber intake in under 3 seconds. He lets out a massive burp, patting his metal chest plate, and tells the barbarian to try and retrieve it now. He gives a mocking, predatory look, asking if Kadim still thinks he has the upper hand. Kadim's expression goes deadpan. He calmly notes that if Krevin wants to play this game, he will gladly cooperate. He gives a very dark, dangerous smile, noting that he will just have to work a bit faster so he can extract the map before it passes completely into Krevin's digestive tract. That is peak medical advice from a man who doesn't carry a license. Krevin's smile instantly disappears. He screams to his men, ordering them to fire and prevent the barbarian from taking a single step closer. The crossbowmen pull their triggers, the tension releasing as the heavy bolts split the air. Kadim's eyes lock onto the incoming projectiles. But instead of dodging, he reaches out and grabs Graham by the neck. Graham is still screaming for them to run, and we get a sudden, hilarious shift in tactical logic. Kadim pulls Graham directly in front of him with zero hesitation. The heavy steel bolts rain down across the clearing, and Graham is turned into a literal human pincushion. The bolts bury themselves into his armor, his thighs, and his shoulders. He lets out an absolute, throat-shredding scream of pure agony. Krevin is completely dumbfounded, staring at the barbarian who just used his own employer as a meat shield without a single shred of remorse. Kadim is just standing behind the screaming, bleeding bandit, using his massive frame to block any incoming fire. Krevin is sweating, realizing he is dealing with a complete lunatic who operates entirely outside of normal human ethics. He screams at his men to aim for the parts sticking out, pointing out that Kadim's body is too massive to be completely covered by a single ginger bandit. He orders them to reload and fire in unison. Up on the wall, a bandit is frantically trying to wind his crossbow crank, cursing under his breath. But Kadim doesn't just sit and wait for them to finish their reload animation. He reaches for his belt and hurls his chipped old hand axe. The wood and metal spin through the air like a helicopter blade, heading straight for the ramparts. And it hits. The axe buries itself directly into the forehead of the loading bandit, throwing him off the wooden platform in a shower of blood. The body crashes into the dirt with a heavy thud, the remaining crossbowman shouting in terror. Kadim points his blood-soaked finger at the next target. The bandit on the wall screams, telling everyone to get down because the barbarian is actively sniping them with thrown hand axes. Meanwhile, poor Graham is still hanging from Kadim's grip, crying and begging for them to please stop shooting because it hurts. Another arrow grazes his hand, splattering blood across his leather sleeve. At this point, Graham completely snaps. He starts screaming every curse word he knows, begging the barbarian to just end his misery and kill him instead of keeping him alive as an umbrella. Krevin realizes his ranged unit is completely useless, yelling at his moron crossbowmen to stop firing individually and cease fire before they kill their own barricades. He points his hammer at the clearing, ordering his entire infantry unit to charge and overwhelm the target with sheer numbers. Dozens of armed bandits sprint out of the bushes, their boots kicking up dust as they rush the center of the clearing. Kadim decides he is finished with his shield. He grabs Graham by the collar and hurls his arrow-riddled body straight into the oncoming front line like a bowling ball. Graham crashes into them, knocking 3 bandits flat onto their backs. Kadim reaches for his belt, pulling out his leather flask. He notes that, while Mosquito can heal his wounds, fighting this many opponents without a buff is a hassle, and he might sustain some annoying injuries that slow down his schedule. He downs the flask, his eyes turning a glowing, feral red. He decides to end this raid quickly and decisively. Krevin is watching from his throne, completely confused. He wonders if the barbarian is so relaxed that he stopped to take a quick drink of alcohol mid-fight to quench his thirst. But Kadim is feeling an intense, dark wave of elation flooding his system. The blood buff is multiplying his stats, and his vision is turning a deep, satisfying crimson. He grips his sword, his boots digging into the dry dirt as the dark red aura of the blood berserker explodes around his shoulders. His focus is locked in. The bandits charge, screaming that the boss of the Blood Cave gang is finished and it's time to end the savage. But before their swords can even swing, Kadim simply disappears from their vision. The bandit's eyes go wide as a red line of metal splits his neck. The first head goes spinning through the air, splattering the crowd in crimson. The bandits are screaming, completely panicked, asking where the barbarian went. This is the demon blood buff effect. Our guy is moving like a glitching speedrunner, passing through their ranks in a series of crimson flashes. Blades are clashing, armor is breaking, and nobody can even track his coordinates. This is the agility enhancement in full effect. The bandits are crying, asking why on earth a massive barbarian is moving faster than a physical arrow. He executes 3 clean, horizontal cuts in under a second, 3 more bodies crashing into the dirt before they can even register the pain. Kreven is watching the slaughter from the gates, his jaw completely locked in terror, as his entire front line is systematically turned into a statistics report. He is sweating, asking himself what kind of monster he is looking at. He knows there is no way a common barbarian received Elga's holy blessing, so he has no idea where this power is coming from. Kadim stands amidst the blood and falling bodies, his red eyes completely locked onto the boss at the gates. Kreven gulps, his throat completely dry. He frantically yells to his remaining guard on the wall, ordering him to load a crossbow and bring it to him immediately. He grabs the heavy weapon, his large hands gripping the wooden stock. He aims down the sights, his breathing slow. He knows that no matter how fast a warrior is, there is always a split second when they have to stop moving to deliver a strike. He watches Kadim slice through another group of his men, and right as the blade finishes its arc, the target is momentarily static. Kadim's back is turned to the gate, his focus seemingly locked onto the next bandit. Kreven yells that this is his chance, his finger squeezing the trigger. The heavy steel bolt is released, splitting the dark night air as it heads straight for Kadim's spine. The bolt flies past the falling bodies. Kadim's eyes flash under his dark hair. Kreven lets out a victorious grin, thinking that he has officially secured the winning shot. Hashtag chapter 16, with the heavy crossbow bolt flying straight toward Kadim's neck at point-blank range. Kadim simply tilts his head back, his red eyes tracking the metal tip. Kreven is still celebrating, thinking the fight is over. The bolt is inches from Kadim's face, but Kreven's smile instantly freezes, his eyes widening in absolute horror. Kadim's hand is shown clamped tightly around the shaft of the bolt, the wood splintering under his grip. Our guy caught the arrow barehanded. Blood is dripping from his palm, but his face is completely calm, his red eyes boring straight into the boss at the gates. Kreven's brain is officially breaking. He is screaming, asking what kind of nonsense is this, wondering how a human being is physically capable of catching a heavy military bolt mid-flight. Kadim drops the broken bolt into the dirt, taking a step forward. His presence is completely overwhelming, the dead bandits on the ground behind him forming a very clear warning sign. Kreven frantically yells to his assistant, demanding more loaded weapons immediately. The remaining infantry tries to block Kadim's path, screaming for everyone to charge and stop him from reaching the boss. Kadim simply slices through them in a single, fluid motion, the blood spraying across the wooden palisades. Kreven is shivering, realizing the barbarian has zero intention of stopping. He wonders if Kadim shifted his priority to the boss because the projectile fire was getting annoying. He asks his assistant how many loaded weapons they have left in the reserve. The assistant stammers, pointing out they only have 3. Kreven's face goes dark, telling his men to listen to his instructions very carefully. We see a quick shot of him drawing a small throwing dagger from his belt. He hoists his massive concrete warhammer off the floor and swings it down with all his might, aiming straight for the ground. The impact shakes the entire courtyard, kicking up a massive, blinding cloud of gray dirt and gravel. Kadim's red eyes narrow as the dust screen blocks his line of sight. Kreven's plan was highly strategic. He knew that if Kadim cleared his guards, he would close the distance in an instant, meaning swinging his slow hammer at the target was useless. So, he used the dust to blind him, pointing to his men on the wall. Kadim is shown navigating the dust cloud, his blade ready. Kreven screams, bringing his hammer down in a massive overhead swing. The weapon slams into the dirt right where Kadim was standing, sending sparks flying. Kadim leaps back, noting that Kreven is actually using his brain to manipulate the terrain. Kreven yells to his men, ordering them to fire through the dust cloud. The crossbow bolts fly straight through the screen of dirt. Kadim realizes they are trying to corner him with petty tricks. Kreven pulls another throwing dagger, his movements quick for a man of his size. He aims for Kadim's blind spot, but Kadim simply blocks the bolt, calling the ambush a cheap trick. Kreven yells at him to try and catch this one too. He launches a close-range bolt straight at Kadim's face through the dust. He laughs, boasting that if he fires from this distance, there is no way the barbarian can react. The bolt is shown heading straight for Kadim's forehead. There is a flash of red light. Kreven's eyes widen as a shadow passes straight through his strike zone. The blade slices clean through Kreven's side, a massive spray of blood painting the dirt. The bald boss collapses to his knees, clutching his bleeding side. He is completely bewildered, noting that the arrow was a direct hit. He wonders how the barbarian is still alive. We get a close-up of Kadim's mouth. He caught the close-range bolt straight between his teeth, biting the wood in half. He spits the tip out with a cold, disrespectful "two." The metal tip bounces harmlessly across the stone floor. Kreven's brain has officially exited the chat. He is staring at the barbarian, who just caught a high-velocity crossbow bolt with his teeth like it was a minor snack. Kadim wipes the blood from his mouth, calmly telling Kreven that he is going to go deal with the rest of his subordinates and will be back shortly. He orders the boss to wait quietly. That is the kind of hospitality you only get from an angry landlord. The remaining bandits on the wall completely lose their courage, screaming for everyone to run because the boss is defeated. Kadim walks back into the courtyard, driving his sword into the dirt. He stands over the bleeding Kreven, his red eyes glowing in the dark. Kreven is shivering, admitting that it is a bit late to bring this up, but he would highly appreciate it if Kadim would spare his life. Kadim gives a very polite smile, telling him not to worry. He has absolutely no intention of killing him. He is just going to slice open his stomach to retrieve the map Kreven swallowed. Kreven screams in absolute panic, yelling that there is absolutely no need for surgery. He claims he has the entire contents of the map perfectly memorized. He quickly spills the details. If you enter the deep hole under the fist-shaped rock in the exact center of Molden Castle, the ancient treasure is hidden inside a black chest. Kadim looks down at him, his gaze sharp. He asks why. If Kreven knew the exact location of a legendary dwarven weapon, he didn't just go and grab it himself. Kreven sweats, explaining that normally they would have sent a squad, but Molden Castle is currently surrounded by hundreds of Imperial soldiers. That is why they were forced to move their operations to the border. Kadim's expression goes cold. He tells Kreven he is not interested in his financial problems, asking what troops are besieging Molden and why. Kreven explains that it is Viscount Adlin's army. The official reason is to execute the Lord of Molden, the Demon Baron, who allegedly signed a contract with a demon. But rumors say there are other circumstances behind the scenes, because if there was real proof, the Holy Knights would have officially stepped in. Kadim's gaze goes distant. He realizes that what he thought was a simple fetch quest is getting increasingly complicated. He raises his sword, telling Kreven that he understands. Now, he is going to take out the map to verify if Kreven was lying. Kreven screams, asking why he is still doing this if he already gave him the information. Kadim replies that he simply doesn't trust the word of a bandit. He reminds Kreven of his own words from earlier, "Take it if you can." Kreven can only stare in absolute sweating silence. We cut to a peaceful campfire, burning in the woods. Kadim tosses a pile of bloody, shredded leather pieces onto the dirt in front of Duncan, telling the merchant to try and piece them together. Duncan is completely horrified, holding the wet, bloody leather and asking where on earth this map was hidden to end up in this state. Kadim replies simply, "Stomach." Duncan lets out a hilarious, high-pitched scream. Kadim explains, very casually, that the bandit tore it up and swallowed it, so he simply retrieved it directly from his stomach. Duncan is staring at the wet leather, wondering why his life has turned into a culinary nightmare. Duncan sighs, spending 10 minutes piecing the fragments together. He notes that the map seems to match exactly what the bandit boss described. Kadim looks at the completed map, realizing the story about Molden Castle is likely true. He mutters the name Demon Baron, his expression thoughtful. He knows that in this game, any noble with that title is bound to be connected to some very high-level demon blood. We transition to a quiet, poorly lit border village. A peasant couple is shown trembling, their hands shaking as they are questioned by imperial authorities. The man is pleading, claiming that nobody has passed through their village recently other than a few locals getting hurt while working, begging them to believe him. And then, the camera pans up, revealing Lady Helia Muviel and her armored paladin unit standing right in front of them. The blonde arch-paladin has officially caught the trail. She looks down at them with her cold green eyes, asking them if they can swear to those words before the sun god Elga. And just like that, our guy's quiet journey to Molden Castle is about to run straight into the elite forces of the state church. This is the perfect moment to subscribe, because what happens next is going to be an absolute bloodbath. We open chapter 17 with Lady Helia Muviel standing in a dark border village, looking like a high-level raid boss who just wandered into a starting zone to grief the local NPCs. She looks down at the shivering peasant couple, her emerald green eyes completely devoid of warmth. She asks them, in that incredibly cold voice of hers, if they can swear before the sun god Elga that they are telling the absolute truth. The husband is sweating bullets, stammering out that they are indeed telling the truth, and that absolutely no heretic has passed through their village recently. Helia's gaze shifts to the peasant woman, her eyes narrowing. She demands a solemn oath, wanting to see if their stories actually hold up under pressure. And we get a quick flashback explaining why these villagers are lying to a literal arch-paladin. Our guy Kadim, standing over them like a towering shadow, giving them a very clear, very logical threat. If anyone asks about him, keep your mouth shut. His dark eyes are locked onto them, cold and uncompromising. He told them that if they ignored his warning, he would return and slaughter every single person in the village, leaving absolutely no survivors. When the choice is between a theoretical punishment from the church and an immediate speedrunner execution from a giant barbarian, the math is pretty simple. The woman nods, swearing to the paladin. Helia looks back at her subordinate, noting that the tracking traces definitely led straight to this settlement. She asks how it's possible that not a single soul saw the target pass through. The husband quickly chimes in, swearing again that no mercenary of any kind has set foot in their territory. Helia gives a subtle, incredibly dangerous smile. She notes, very quietly, that she never actually specified that the heretic they were hunting was a mercenary. The woman instantly gasps, covering her mouth as she realizes she just fell into the oldest verbal trap in the book. If you have never read this manhwa, let me tell you, lying to the Inquisition is basically a fast pass to the afterlife. Helia's hand slowly moves to the hilt of her gold-plated sword. The tension in the panel is thick enough to cut with a dagger. The couple's hearts are hammering against their ribs, their faces pale under the moonlight. But before Helia can draw her steel, a throat-shredding scream of pure agony echoes from a nearby wooden cabin. The sound is monstrous, like an animal being torn apart in the dark. Helia stops, demanding to know what that noise is. The mother frantically waves her hands, claiming it's nothing, just a minor family issue, and begs the arch-paladin to ignore it. Helia doesn't listen to a single word. She She pushes past them, her heavy armored boots thudding against the dirt. She kicks the wooden door open, her expression turning into a mix of disgust and cold calculation. Inside the cabin, a young boy named Maroni is convulsing violently on the floor, his eyes rolled back, white foam spilling from his lips. Helia immediately diagnoses the situation, stating that the child is possessed by a demon, and a very high-level one at that. The mother is crying, desperately claiming it's just a chronic illness her son has had since he was a baby. Helia steps forward, her steel-toed boots clinking against the wooden floorboards. The mother throws herself on the floor, grabbing Helia's greaves, sobbing and begging her to spare her child, pleading for mercy, just this once. Helia raises her hand to the sky, beginning a dramatic, holy chant to the sun god Elga. She prays for mercy on those whose souls are stained by the darkness of the abyss, golden light starting to pool around her armored fingers. She declares that she will consecrate this lost lamb, her eyes closed in deep, pious focus. The golden holy manna explodes from her hand, lighting up the entire interior of the small cabin. The light washes over the boy, and you can see the dark, demonic smoke literally being burned away from his body. The parents watch in absolute awe as the divine radiance fills the room, thinking their child has just been saved by a saint. The warm, holy energy fills the cabin, and even the father is touched by the sheer warmth of the spell. Maroni's breathing stabilizes, his eyes closing as he falls into a peaceful, quiet sleep. The mother runs over, weeping tears of joy, cradling her son and calling him her baby. Helia stands over them, calmly stating that the child has been permanently saved from the devil's whispers. She smiles, her voice incredibly gentle, promising that his soul will never suffer again. The mother looks up, her face full of gratitude, thanking the arch-paladin from the bottom of her heart. But then, Helia's sword is suddenly engulfed in a massive wave of golden, destructive flames, and she slices the boy's head clean off right in front of his mother's eyes. The golden fire instantly incinerates his head, leaving nothing but ash. Helia stands there, her face completely calm, explaining that while the boy's soul was purified, a physical body that has once been touched by demonic corruption cannot be allowed to exist in this world. She claims he had to offer his life as a sacrifice to wash away the sin. The mother is completely broken, staring at her empty arms where her son's head was just resting a second ago, her mind failing to process the absolute psychopathic hypocrisy of the church. She lets out an absolute soul-shredding scream of pure grief and horror. Helia looks down at her, entirely unfazed. She tells her not to worry, because the child's soul is now enjoying eternal rest at Elga's side. This is peak dark fantasy writing. The Holy Protectors are actually just a highly organized, gilded death squad. Her expression goes cold again as she points her burning sword at the mother's throat. She notes that while the purified boy is at peace, an unbeliever who lied under oath to the church is definitely not. She tells her that if she doesn't want her own soul to wander in endless darkness for eons, she better start talking immediately. She demands to know where the giant barbarian heretic went. Meanwhile, miles away, we cut back to our guys camping in the woods. The contrast between Helia's fanatical horror show and Kadim's quiet campfire is honestly hilarious. Duncan is organizing their loot on a blanket, noting that thanks to Kadim destroying 2 entire bandit gangs in one day, they have secured more than enough food, coin, and travel supplies. They actually had to leave most of it behind, because they couldn't carry it all. But he looks at Kadim, admitting that despite looting both hideouts, he couldn't find any of the high-quality weapons Kadim was hoping to find. All they have is their starting gear, and a very chipped old hand axe. Kadim asks if Duncan knows anything about the Lord of Molden Castle, whom the bandits called the Demon Baron. Duncan rubs his chin, noting that he has heard of him in passing. He says the nickname likely didn't stick because of cruel taxes or a literal demonic contract. He explains that he once had a drink with a merchant from Molden who missed his hometown deeply and described the Baron as an incredibly kind, fair ruler. He reasons that if the Lord was an evil, demon-worshipping tyrant, his citizens wouldn't speak of him with such genuine affection. Kadim crosses his arms, looking skeptical. He notes that a good reputation proves absolutely nothing about a connection to demons. He explains that there are plenty of high-level demons who will grant abundance and wealth to a human first, only to snatch it away in a single instant to harvest their despair. He looks down, realizing that the only way to find out the truth and secure that legendary dwarven throwing axe is to break into the besieged castle and check it out himself. He reaches for his leather flask, realizing his resources are dangerously low. He has barely a single sip of demon blood left, his iron sword, and a loose hand axe. He wonders if he can really break through a blockade of hundreds of Imperial soldiers with such a pathetic inventory. Duncan looks at him, swallowing hard, and asks if he can ask a single personal question. Kadim turns his head, giving him a quiet, questioning look. Duncan asks why. During their fight with the bandits, Kadim introduced himself as the Great Warrior of Atala. He asks if that is a common title among those who worship the god of wilderness. Kadim asks why he wants to know. Duncan admits that according to the rumors, the legendary gladiator Aegon's Raging Horn also goes around calling himself the Great Warrior of Atala. Kadim's eye instantly twitches, his gaze turning incredibly sharp. Our guy stands up so fast that Duncan literally gasps, backing away in fear. Duncan immediately throws himself on the ground, begging for mercy and screaming that he has committed a deadly sin by asking a stupid, useless question. He really thought he was about to get turned into a skipping rope, but Kadim is lost in deep, serious thought. He explains, in a very quiet voice, that Great Warrior of Atala is not some cheap nickname you give yourself for fighting well. We see a massive, majestic vision of a dark, multi-winged demonic entity hovering in a crimson sky. Kadim explains that it is a sacred, unique title, given only to one warrior at a time, by the god of wilderness and struggle, bearing the divine mission to slaughter great demons. He concludes that there are only two possibilities. Either this gladiator champion, Aegon's Raging Horn, is an imposter using the sacred name without knowing any better, or the god Atala has officially forgotten about Kadim and chosen a new champion to carry his blessing. He clenches his fist, the leather of his bracers creaking under the strain. He looks down at Duncan, telling him to get up because it's not his fault. He orders him to get some rest, stating they leave for Molden Castle at daybreak. He turns his back, his heavy boot digging into the dirt. He walks into the dark forest, leaving a very confused merchant behind. He looks up at the sky, his eyes burning with a terrifying, predatory focus. He vows that whether this gladiator is a cheap fraud or a new champion, he will personally tear him limb from limb the moment they meet. Hashtag Chapter 18. We open Chapter 18 at Molden Castle. The sky is dark, covered in heavy gray clouds that match the incredibly depressing state of the siege. On the battlements, two Imperial sentries stand guard, their expressions tired and worn down from months of stagnation. We see the massive blockade camp of Viscount Adlin's army stretching across the valley, a literal sea of tents and banners blocking every escape route. The guards are on high alert, holding their spears tightly, and hiding in the bushes just outside the camp are Kadim and Duncan, peeking through the leaves. Duncan is shivering, whispering if there really are hundreds of soldiers blockading the gates. He notes that no matter how much he looks, there is absolutely no gap or blind spot they can use to sneak into the castle. Kadim tells him to shut up and find a safe place nearby to hide, stating that he will go in alone. Duncan is shocked, asking if he seriously plans to fight his way through a literal army by himself. Kadim explains his actual strategy. He is going to use the cover of night to slip past the camp and only neutralize the sentries guarding the drawbridge. Suddenly, a heavy, metallic creaking sound echoes across the valley. Kadim and Duncan turn their heads in absolute surprise. The massive iron portcullis of Molden Castle is slowly rising, and the drawbridge is being lowered. Duncan stammers, asking if Baron Molden has finally lost his mind and decided to launch an all-out, suicidal war. But Kadim's eyes light up. He notes that, whatever the reason, this is his perfect opportunity. There is no time to think, and absolutely no room to hesitate. He grabs Duncan by the collar, telling him to hold on tight. Duncan is completely confused, asking what on earth he is supposed to hold. Kadim pops the cork on his last flask, downs the final drop of mutant demon blood, and his agility buff explodes to life. He picks up the merchant like a sack of potatoes, leaping forward into the open. His red eyes are burning. His teeth grit as he prepares to break through the blockade camp in a single high-speed dash. The Imperial soldiers stand in their lines, completely unaware of the mountain of muscle sprinting towards them. One of the sentries turns his head, letting out a confused grunt as he notices a sudden shift in the air. But before he can even blink, a line of red metal passes through his neck, and his head is cleanly severed, a fountain of blood spraying across his armor. The body falls forward into the dirt, the blood painting the stones. Kadim doesn't even slow down, his red eyes locked onto the next line of defense. He cuts through 3 more soldiers in a split second, their armor breaking under the sheer speed of his swing. Duncan is screaming for his life, his face turning blue as he is carried through a literal human meat grinder at Mach 2. But as Kadim is slicing his way through, he notices something highly unusual about these Imperial soldiers. He notes that their comrades are literally getting decapitated right in front of their faces, yet there is absolutely no panic, no movement, or even a shred of agitation from the rest of the unit. They are standing completely static, like wooden puppets. He concludes that while it's incredibly creepy, he doesn't have the luxury of stopping to satisfy his curiosity. He continues his high-speed assault, clearing a path through the silent, unresponsive soldiers. He kicks off the ground, launching himself and Duncan over the final line of barricades. He lands cleanly on the drawbridge, where a single, middle-aged man is standing alone, looking entirely shocked. Kadim swings his sword, slicing the guard next to the man. The body crashes into the wood, blood splattering across the drawbridge. Kadim lets out a heavy breath, his agility buff starting to flicker. He drops Duncan, standing over the dead sentries, noting that they have officially cleared the outer blockade camp. He looks down at the middle-aged man standing in front of him. The man has styled brown hair, a mustache, and a red cape. The noble is completely stunned, his voice shaking as he asks what kind of creature has just broken into his castle. Kadim recognizes him from the descriptions, asking if he is indeed the demon baron of Molden Castle, and why on earth he was walking out of his fortress completely alone. The baron looks at the blood-drenched barbarian, his expression full of a very noble, very tragic sadness. He explains, with a heavy sigh, that the rumors of him signing a contract with a demon are completely false. He notes that there are complex political circumstances behind the scenes. Kadim doesn't care about his feelings. He grabs him by the collar, turning around and ordering him to follow him back inside, where they can talk privately. The baron tries to resist, screaming that he cannot return like this. He explains that he came out to sacrifice his own life to Viscount Adlin, so the siege would end and his people would be spared. Kadim simply tells him to shut up and die later, dragging him back across the bridge. Kadim's red eyes are cold. He has zero interest in a noble's dramatic sacrifice when he still needs to find that dwarven treasure hole. We cut to the castle walls, where 2 young sentries are watching this absolute circus, wondering where on earth their lord's tragic suicide plan went wrong. An older guard is running up the stone steps, carrying a heavy sack, calling out for the Baron. And we get a very touching, very slow flashback, explaining why these soldiers love their lord so much. We see Baron Molden personally carrying heavy water skins up to the battlements, offering water to a young soldier named Delton, and telling him his parents would be incredibly proud of him. The soldier is deeply moved, asking why the lord is doing such manual labor when he could have easily ordered his staff to do it. The Baron replies that carrying water is easy, while standing guard on high alert against an unseen enemy for 4 months is the real hard work. He looks out at the enemy camp, admitting that it is all because of his own incompetence and lack of virtue that his people are suffering. Delton vehemently objects, screaming that the swindlers of Adlin are entirely at fault and that the Baron has done absolutely nothing wrong. He says they are honored to follow him to the end. The Baron closes his eyes, deeply touched by their loyalty. He thanks them, but internally, his resolve to sacrifice himself is solidified. He doesn't want to make these brave young men suffer for a political blockade. The guards watch him walk away, their hearts heavy. We shift to the interior of the castle, where a beautiful, arched window looks out onto the desolate courtyard. The Baron is talking to his wife, the Baroness, who is sitting quietly on a sofa. She looks up, her face elegant but tired, noting that he didn't come to her room just to talk about the spring weather. She asks what has brought him here. The Baron asks if she remembers the colorful tulips they bought and planted together last year. He looks out the window, noting that her aesthetic taste is truly beautiful, and that the courtyard would have been gorgeous if those tulips had bloomed. The Baroness looks down, noting that the inside of the castle is currently suffering from a devastating famine, so tulips do not matter. The Baron's voice drops, his face full of agony. He explains that on his way back to the keep, he saw the children of the castle digging up the frozen soil and eating the raw tulip bulbs. He says they were terrified when they saw him, but still stuffed the raw dirt and roots into their mouths. The Baroness asks, with a trembling voice, if he scolded them. The Baron closes his eyes, asking what on earth he could scold them for, when his own incompetence is the reason they are starving. He laments that they have been besieged for 4 months, their winter provisions ran out weeks ago, and his citizens are currently holding pitchforks instead of farming tools. He says if they continue to hold out, Molden will simply turn into a giant tomb. He looks at his wife, declaring that he will walk out of the gates today and offer his life to Viscount Adlin. He believes that once his head is delivered, Adlin will lose his political justification to blockade the city. The Baroness jumps up, crying out that this is not the real reason they are blockading them, and that everyone knows he has absolutely no connection to demons. The Baron gently explains that in politics, the truth is entirely irrelevant. Only profit and justification matter. He points out that if Viscount Adlin actually cared about the truth, he would have called the Holy Knights of Elga months ago, instead of blockading the city with a private army. He tells her that if Adlin doesn't withdraw after his death, she must send a messenger to the Emperor to spread rumors of his atrocity. If the crown still ignores them, she must defect to the Free Cities Alliance and seek their aid. He holds her hands, entrusting the future of Molden and its people to her wisdom. He vows that this dragging battle will finally end today with the death of the demon Baron. We cut back to the present, where the Baron's loyal guards run up to him, crying out in relief that he is still alive. They look at Kadim, completely bewildered by the giant, blood-drenched barbarian, who is currently holding their lord by the cloak. Suddenly, one of the guards points a shaking finger over Kadim's shoulder, his eyes wide with horror. We look back across the drawbridge, where Viscount Adlin's soldiers are slowly marching toward the open gates, but they are not moving like normal human soldiers. Their heads are tilted at unnatural angles, their movements sluggish and heavy. And then, one of the Imperial soldiers lets out a feral, throat-shredding roar of pure demonic rage. His eyes are glowing a brilliant blood red, his jaw stretching past human limits. They are completely mutated. Kadim looks back, his crimson eyes narrowing, as he realizes the demon Baron accusation might have been a projection. Viscount Adlin's army isn't blockading a demon, they are the demons. This is the perfect moment to click that subscribe button, because our guy is about to fight an entire army of infected Imperial soldiers. With the outer perimeter in absolute chaos, Baron Molden screams at the top of his lungs to shut the main gate. The heavy wood and iron begin to slide down, but the enemy is already right on their heels. Adlin's vanguard is charging the entrance, and the defenders are already making peace with whatever god they worship. The sheer panic on the ramparts is real, with soldiers screaming as the reality of a breach sinks in. But then, everyone freezes, noticing the massive barbarian standing dead center in the gateway. Kadim doesn't even look back. He casually reaches out and swipes a spear from a nearby soldier's hand. The guard is too stunned to even protest, as Kadim takes a solid stance, his eyes glowing with that familiar, terrifying crimson. He grips the wooden shaft, his fingers digging into the wood as the air around him starts to warp from sheer physical pressure. His muscles swell, veins popping like he just took 3 scoops of pre-workout on an empty stomach, and with a sound like a literal jet engine taking off, he launches the spear straight into the charging mob. The spear doesn't just hit the front guy. It acts like a kinetic railgun, tearing through multiple fully armored infantrymen. They are thrown backward in a spectacular spray of metal and blood, instantly halting the momentum of the entire vanguard. The Baron is completely speechless, looking at Kadim like he just witnessed a natural disaster in human human form. Kadim just cracks his neck and delivers the coldest line possible. Next, Adlan's backline tries to salvage the charge, throwing a volley of javelins to pin our guy down. But Kadim just bats them away, the impact of steel on steel ringing out as the remaining enemy troops hesitate. The soldiers on the walls realize this is their only window to survive and yell to drop the iron gate completely. The heavy portcullis drops, but because this is a dramatic story, the universe decides to play its favorite card. The gate suddenly screeches to a violent halt halfway down, leaving a massive gap for the enemy to crawl through. The guard at the winch is losing his absolute mind, screaming that the gears are jammed and won't turn no matter what. The Baron looks like he's about to have a stroke right then and there, because they are officially out of options. Kadim just sighs, thoroughly unimpressed by the castle's lack of preventative maintenance. The Baron tries to restore order, yelling for the strongest men to get to the winch room and for the archers to cover the gap. But before anyone can move, Kadim walks calm, as you like right under the heavy iron spikes of the hanging gate. The Baron watches in horror as this absolute madman reaches up and grabs the bottom of the iron portcullis with his bare hands. He isn't trying to lift it. He is literally trying to force the jammed gate down, using nothing but raw, unadulterated physical violence. He lets out a low growl, his arms locking, as the massive iron structure begins to groan under his grip. The metal screeching is deafening, as the jammed gears in the winch tower literally start to strip and shatter from the force. The soldiers are watching this thinking the game's physics engine has completely broken down, because no human should be able to do this. The Baron snaps out of his trance and orders his men to throw anything they have to keep the enemy from rushing the gap. Spears and rocks rain down on the vanguard, buying our guy just a few more seconds. Kadim takes a deep breath, telling everyone behind him to step back unless they want to get flattened. He puts his entire weight into the downward push, his aura flaring in a dark, blood-red mist. And with a massive crash that shakes the entire foundation of the outer wall, he slams the portcullis flat into the stone floor. The enemy soldiers on the other side are left staring at solid iron, completely shut out of the castle. Kadim lets go of the gate, exhaling a cloud of steam like a steam engine, cooling down after a long run. He turns back to the garrison, dusting off his hands like he didn't just manually override a medieval security system. The Baron is staring at him, his brain completely fried, trying to calculate the sheer muscle mass required for that feat. Kadim walks right up to his face, his crimson eyes locking onto him. Now then, shall we have a calm chat, Baron? Cut to a massive table, filled with hot soup, roasted meats, and fresh bread inside the main hall. The Baron is trying to play the perfect host, offering them whatever they want, while Duncan is busy doing a speedrun of eating everything in sight. Duncan is literally crying tears of joy, asking for a second bowl before he even finishes swallowing the first one. But Kadim doesn't touch the food. He crosses his arms, leaning back as he drops a heavy truth bomb. You've been besieged for months. You shouldn't have this much food left. The Baron smiles warmly but sadly, explaining that his family can easily skip a few meals, and he'd rather starve than let his guests go hungry. Kadim looks at him, totally unimpressed by the dramatic, noble routine. Honor? Is that why you walked outside the gates to die? He demands the full story, wanting to know exactly why a lord would choose to hand himself over to a hostile army. The Baron clasps his hands, sighing as he prepares to dump some heavy geopolitical lore on us. He explains that when he was young, the Emperor sent him to this barren border wasteland to turn it into something livable. He poured his heart and soul into the land, and after a decade, Molden became a prosperous, peaceful sanctuary. But their peace was shattered by the greed of a neighboring lord, Viscount Adlan. Adlan's land was originally better, but as Molden surpassed it, the Viscount grew consumed by jealousy and began spreading rumors. He claimed the Baron signed a blood contract with a devil, labeling him the Demon Baron of the Borderlands. Initially, nobody cared. Baseless rumors from the middle of nowhere don't usually travel far. But the political landscape shifted when the Empire's fourth prince fell hard for Adlan's second daughter. With the imperial family suddenly backing him, Adlan's words became law, and the Emperor gave his silent approval to start a holy subjugation. They've been blockaded by 400 soldiers for 4 months, and the Baron couldn't bear to watch his people starve anymore. He wanted to die so they could live. Kadim listens quietly, but then his gamer brain points out a massive logic flaw. 4 months? That makes no sense. The Baron is confused as Kadim explains that keeping 400 soldiers fed in a barren wasteland for 4 months with zero progress is a logistical nightmare. Kadim's eyes narrow. Someone is heavily funding Adlan's campaign from the shadows, and it isn't just about a jealous neighbor anymore. The Baron admits he doesn't know, then asks the real question. Who are you? And what business do you have that's worth breaking through Adlan's camp? Kadim gets straight to the point. He's here for the loot. Is there a fish-shaped rock in the exact center of this castle? The Baron gasps, his hands trembling. How could you possibly know that? There is indeed such a rock in my basement. Kadim stands up, ready to go. Good. Take me there. I'll grab what I need and leave quietly. But the Baron's face goes completely pale, and he immediately shuts him down. I cannot do that. Entry to the basement is strictly forbidden. Kadim's expression instantly hardens, his tone dropping an octave. And what is the reason? The Baron stands his ground, looking him dead in the eye. I cannot tell that to an outsider either. I am sorry. The temperature in the room drops to absolute zero. Kadim's stare could cut glass. Duncan stops eating, sweating bullets, as he realizes they just went from a friendly dinner to an active hostage situation in 5 seconds flat. The silence between the two men is deafening, neither one willing to blink first, as the chapter ends on a knife edge. We open chapter 20, with the Baron still refusing, repeating that the basement is completely off limits. Kadim lets out a long, heavy sigh. I figured things were going a bit too smoothly. Before the Baron can even react, Kadim's hand moves like a flash of lightning, drawing a small eating knife. The Baron's eyes go wide with pure shock as he prepares for the worst. But instead of aiming for his throat, Kadim slams the blade down into the table, right next to the Baron's hand. The wood splinters, the blade vibrating from the sheer impact of the strike. Pinned under the knife is a large, writhing bug that was crawling across the table. Kadim leans in, his crimson eyes glowing in the dim light. You have about 100 soldiers in this castle, right? He points to the twitching insect. By tomorrow, every single one of them is going to end up exactly like this bug. He explains that hiding inside won't save them, and they can't run because the perimeter is sealed. I'll give you a choice, Baron. Do you want to quietly guide me to the basement now, or should I paint this entire castle with innocent blood first? The Baron looks at the pinned bug, then up at Kadim, realizing this man is not playing a character. He will absolutely do it. The Baron closes his eyes, cursing his own mistake for letting such a dangerous monster cross his threshold. I understand, he says quietly. I will guide you to the basement. But not right now. I have one condition before we go down. Kadim tilts his head, thoroughly amused. A condition? The Baron explains his terms. I want you to help defend this castle after I surrender myself and die. Adlin might attack in desperation once his political excuse is gone. Once you repel the attack and secure the safety of my people, my steward will guide you to the basement. Kadim stands there for a second, then literally scoffs in his face. Ridiculous. Do you honestly think that's an honorable death? The Baron is taken aback, as Kadim completely deconstructs his noble martyr complex. You're facing an enemy you can't handle, leaving the mess to a complete stranger, and running away to die so you don't have to watch. The Baron looks down, his pride taking a massive hit as Kadim's words cut right through his noble delusions. Sacrificing yourself looks noble on paper, but you're just dumping your burden on others. It's nothing more than a coward's rage quit. Kadim clenches his fist, his expression turning cold and serious. The Atalan way of honor is different. Even if your limbs are twisted, your ribs crushed, and your guts spilled on the dirt, you fight until your very last breath. That is an honorable death. You don't throw your life away in a trade. You make the enemy pay for every inch of your skin. The Baron stares at the pinned bug, completely silent as Kadim's philosophy of survival sinks into his bones. Kadim leans over the table. So let me make you a different offer, Baron. One where we both get what we want. The two men whisper, negotiating a secret deal while Duncan watches from the side, silently praying they don't start throwing hands again. Kadim finishes his proposal, crossing his arms. So, what do you say? The Baron takes a long moment, then nods. I need to think this over. Please wait in the guest room in the inner castle. A guard guides Kadim and Duncan down the grand hallway of the inner keep. Duncan is still carrying his massive red pack, practically vibrating with nervous energy. They enter the room, and Kadim tells Duncan to take the bed and get some rest. Kadim sits on the edge of the sofa, placing his sword Mosquito within easy arm's reach. Duncan is fidgeting by the bed, clutching his pack like a safety blanket. He finally musters the courage to ask, do you really think the Baron will accept your offer, sir? Kadim doesn't even open his eyes. It's a winning deal for him. And besides, it's not like he has any other choice. Duncan sighs in relief. I thought things were going south back there. The Baron is usually so gentle. I didn't expect him to be so stubborn. Why was he trying so hard to block access to the basement? There must be something incredibly important down there. Kadim opens one crimson eye. The reason is obvious. Duncan looks at him, completely clueless. Obvious? What do you mean? Before Kadim can explain, the heavy wooden door creaks open. Kadim looks up, his expression neutral as the guest enters. Standing at the doorway is Baron Molden, but he's no longer wearing his noble robes. He is in full battle armor, looking like a proper commander. Kadim smiles a thin, dangerous smirk. You're back sooner than I expected. Have you made up your mind? The Baron gives a firm, resolved nod. Kadim stands up, gripping his sword. Good. Then get ready. Cut to the outside. The moon is high in the sky, shrouded by thick, dark clouds. Molden Castle is completely dark, the garrison maintaining a strict blackout to avoid drawing attention. The guards on the ramparts are tense, clutching their spears as they watch the empty fields below. Suddenly, one of the sentries hears a soft, rustling sound from the shadows behind him. He spins around, raising his spear. Who goes there? Identify yourselves! Out of the darkness steps the Baron, accompanied by the massive silhouette of Kadim. It's me, Delton. Lower your voice. The officer is stunned, looking at the Baron's heavy armor. Baron, why are you out this late and in that outfit? The Baron puts a hand on his shoulder. Don't panic, Delton. You're the officer in charge of the night watch, aren't you? He hands them a thick rope. Save your questions for later and help us tie this rope tightly to the rampart pillars. And remember this, whatever happens tonight, do not step outside the castle walls. The soldiers quickly secure the rope to the stone pillars, cast in silent confusion. Kadim grabs the rope, takes a step back, and leaps off the edge of the massive stone wall. He slides down with fluid, effortless grace, his heavy frame moving silent as a ghost. The sentries watch in absolute disbelief. He practically threw himself off. How can a man that size move so fast? The Baron grabs the rope next, climbing down after him into the dark abyss. He pauses halfway, looking back up at his loyal men one last time. He calls out the names of his trusted guards: Skilon, Odik, Kren, Benin, Sherrod, Donipin, Delton. I entrust you with a treasure more precious than my own life, he whispers. Protect Molden well. The guards are deeply moved, realizing their lord is going out to fight for them. Kadim is already at the bottom, casually waiting as the Baron finishes his dramatic farewell. Are you finished with your goodbyes? Kadim asks, his tone entirely dry. The Baron lands on the soft dirt, his eyes filled with absolute determination. I am. Kadim draws Mosquito from its sheath, the blade catching the moonlight with a cold, metallic ring. Good. Then let's go. To kill Adlin, or whatever his name is. Baron Molden stares at Kadim, his jaw practically hitting the floor. Our guy just casually suggests that the two of them should walk into an army camp of 400 men with a sword and a single spear. The Baron asks if he has a death wish, because on paper, this is a textbook suicide run. Kadim doesn't even blink, pointing out that the Baron was literally planning to walk out and die anyway. That silence is loud. He explains that whether the Baron gets executed by the Viscount or dies fighting, the result is the same. The enemy loses their political excuse the moment the Lord is dead. The Baron tries to play devil's advocate, arguing that if they sneak in and start killing people, Adlin will just retaliate by flattening the castle. Kadim tells him to stop crying, because he is personally going to make sure the Viscount doesn't survive the night. The Baron just looks at him, trying to process the absolute, unchecked audacity of this barbarian. Kadim adds a tiny safety net, promising that if they somehow fail to kill Adlin tonight, he will stay and help defend the castle, just like they agreed. The Baron realizes this man doesn't even contemplate the physical possibility of his own defeat. It is a win-win for Molden. Instead of dying for nothing, the Baron gets a genuine coin flip at killing the root cause of his suffering. Fast forward to the actual raid. The night is quiet, and the outer barricades are lightly guarded. The air splits as a steel blade flies through the dark. It bites straight into the sentry's throat before he can even think about raising an alarm. He collapses into the dirt without making a single sound. The guard standing right next to him doesn't even flinch. Kadim moves like a shadow, stepping in close. He drives his blade straight through the second sentry's chest. Another one down, completely silent. The Baron walks up behind him, keeping his guard up, but Kadim pauses, his eyes narrowing. Something is deeply wrong with these guards. They aren't reacting to their comrades dying right next to them. He kneels down to examine the corpse. The face is gaunt, and the body is completely emaciated, looking like a literal skeleton wrapped in leather armor. These men have been starving for weeks, yet they stand at their posts like lifeless statues. This isn't discipline. This is something else entirely. Kadim looks deeper into the camp, realizing the standard rules of engagement do not apply here. The Baron looks at him, waiting for the call. Kadim turns his head, his mind already calculating the tactical reality of the situation. He tells the Baron it is time to move deeper into the lion's den. They step quietly through the muddy path of the camp. Suddenly, dozens of fully armored soldiers emerge from the dark, walking aimlessly like NPCs with broken pathfinding. The Baron is sweating, wondering how hundreds of soldiers are awake in the middle of the night without even taking off their gear. One of the soldiers turns to face them. His eyes are hollow, empty, and devoid of any human consciousness. This is not an army. A low, guttural growl echoes through the tents as the puppet soldiers draw their weapons. Kadim tells the Baron to stay here and pull as much aggro as possible by killing every single puppet in sight. The Baron is confused, asking what Kadim is going to be doing while he plays Meat Shield. Kadim looks at him like he just asked a stupid question. He is going for the head of the snake. The demonic energy controlling these husks has to be coming from somewhere, and the commander is the most likely host. He tells the Baron to unleash all his built-up rage on these things. After all, these are the very monsters that ruined his beautiful, prosperous city. The Baron draws his steel, ready to paint the dirt red. Kadim charges forward, a blur of motion. His blade cuts clean through the first line of puppet soldiers, blood spraying across the tents. He wields Mosquito in one hand, and his trusty woodcutter's hand axe in the other. He spins through the crowd, a whirlwind of steel that does not slow down for a single second. Every strike drains their life force, keeping his health pool capped at 100%. He notes that these things have zero defensive instincts. They are nothing more than mindless puppets on invisible strings. The Baron is holding the line behind him, holding back the horde with pure noble fury. Kadim keeps slicing, moving deeper and deeper through the camp. A puppet soldier lets out a mindless shriek as he is cleaved in two. Kadim slams his hand axe down, crushing another skull. He pauses, looking at the glowing red runes on his sword. He notices that the deeper he goes, the harder the puppets are fighting back. This means the puppet master is panicking, concentrating all his demonic will into the nearest guards to slow him down, which means he is heading in the exact right direction. He spots a massive, glowing command tent at the end of the path. He leaves a trail of broken bodies in his wake. Kadim pulls back the tent flap, stepping inside with absolute main character energy. Sitting on a makeshift throne is Viscount Adlin, looking entirely calm. The elite guards inside the tent suddenly freeze, their bodies covered in a strange, flickering purple fire. Adlin rises, his entire frame radiating a dense, oppressive, dark magic. The guards collapse to the floor, like puppet strings being cut, their mana completely absorbed by their master. Adlin's eyes snap open, glowing a feral, demonic red. He looks at Kadim, calling him a shameless wild dog of the wastelands who got lucky. Kadim just smiles, a cold, dangerous smirk spreading across his face. He realizes what he is looking at. Even in his 50-year first playthrough, he only ran into to a couple of these. A possessed variant. This is a rare elite mob, and our guy is absolutely thrilled to start the boss fight. Adlan is furious, demanding to know why this lowly human is laughing in the face of death. He mocks Kadim's physical strength, calling it a cheap trick compared to his demonic authority. He warns him to step away from his prey. He compares Molden to an orchard he has been cultivating for years, waiting for the fruit to ripen so he can harvest their souls. Kadim just takes a step forward, resting his sword on his shoulder. "You sure talk a lot." Adlan's face twists in rage, realizing this barbarian has zero intention of bowing down. A colossal, shadowy demonic face rises behind the Viscount, filling the tent with dark crimson energy. Kadim watches quietly as the air grows heavy. Adlan declares that he is going to shatter Kadim's pathetic ego and take absolute control of his body. He launches his consciousness forward, a wave of purple spirit magic designed to rewrite Kadim's brain. The dark mana wraps around Kadim's body, looking for any weak point to slip inside. Adlan enters his mind plane, expecting to find a typical human soul filled with fear, regret, or weakness. He boasts that even the smallest crack in his mind will allow him to burrow in and turn Kadim into his new favorite meat puppet. But as he dives deeper into Kadim's consciousness, he suddenly freezes. Sitting in the absolute center of Kadim's mind is a giant, glowing mental image of a tired young modern salaryman wearing glasses. The sheer, crushing apathy of a modern corporate wage slave explodes outward. Adlan's spirit let out a painful shriek as he is violently rejected by the system. He staggers back in the real world, clutching his temples in absolute agony. This makes no logical sense to him. His mind control was completely repelled. He screams, asking what kind of monster Kadim is to resist his full power. Kadim just cracks his neck, thoroughly amused. He tells the demon that his mind is already at full capacity. You can't psychologically damage a man who has already survived 40 years of corporate overtime and a 50-year dark fantasy game. His soul is already completely dead. He steps forward, ready to turn this spirit into experience points. Adlan is sweating, realizing the only targets he ever failed to possess before were high-ranking demon lords. For a second, he thought he was fighting a hidden demon king in human disguise. But no matter how closely he looks, Kadim is just a normal, albeit ridiculously buff, human. The embarrassment of failing against a mere human drives him insane. He snaps, his veins pulsing with dark energy. If he cannot steal the body, he will just destroy it. Adlan's body begins to mutate violently, his muscles tearing and expanding as purple, glowing nodes burst from his shoulders. He grows twice his original size, transforming into a massive, bloodthirsty demon brute. He towers over Kadim, promising to crush him into a bloody pulp. Kadim grips the hilt of his sword, his expression turning serious as the real boss fight begins. He watches the demon's movements carefully. Adlan swings his colossal spiked mace, the weapon tearing through the air with a deafening roar. Kadim blocks the strike, but the sheer physical impact sends sparks flying and vibrates all the way up his arms. The force of the blow pushes him back across the dirt. He looks down at his hand axe. The steel is covered in deep fractures, on the verge of shattering completely. He teaks in annoyance. Cheap human weapons really can't handle high-tier physical scaling. Adlan laughs, raising the massive mace for another crushing blow. Kadim sidesteps, dodging just in time. The mace slams into the ground, completely vaporizing the dirt and tearing the command tent to shreds. The fabric rips apart, exposing the battlefield to the night sky. Adlan stands in the ruins, looking like a literal raid boss. He mocks Kadim for running, asking if all his confidence was just talk. Kadim discards his broken axe, realizing a direct head-on collision is a bad mathematical trade right now. He glances over his shoulder, looking back toward the distant castle walls. The massive stone towers of Molden stand silent in the dark. Adlan notices the look and sneers, thinking our guy is looking for a place to run and hide. He raises his hand, and hundreds of puppet soldiers surround the area, sealing off any escape routes. He boasts that even if Kadim killed dozens, he still has over 300 bodies left to use as shields. A puppet soldier lunges with a rusted blade. Another tries to pin him with a spear. Kadim tilts his head, letting the steel slide harmlessly past his cheek. He counterattacks with a swift, vertical slash. He cleaves through the puppet's chest, keeping his momentum going. He is constantly moving, dodging the mob while keeping his distance from the giant demon. Adlan swings the colossal mace again. Kadim ducks under the trajectory, the wind pressure alone rustling his hair. The mace shatters the ground behind him. Adlan roars that there is nowhere left to run. The giant demon looms over him, completely confident in his victory. But Kadim just stands there, totally calm, looking up at him with those cold, calculating eyes. He dodges another massive slam, leaping backward with incredible agility. He slides across the dirt, keeping his eyes on the boss. Adlan lands heavily, his massive weight cracking the stone under his feet. He mocks Kadim's evasion, calling him a rat scurrying around a trap. Kadim ignores the trash talk, glancing up toward the castle wall once again. Adlan laughs, asking if he really thinks fleeing to the castle now will save his life. Meanwhile, high up on the castle ramparts, a pair of boots is sprinting down the stone steps. Adlan continues his villain monologue, declaring that a fragile human body can never stand against a true demon. He claims Kadim should have brought the church's elite paladins if he wanted a real fight. Kadim finally speaks, admitting that dealing with 300 muscle puppets is indeed a bit troublesome in his current state. Adlin laughs, thinking the barbarian is finally ready to accept his fate. But then, Kadim drops a question that stops his heart. But what about your real body? Adlin's eyes go wide. What? High up on the castle walls, we see Duncan, our cowardly, screaming merchant friend, who is currently hyperventilating. Kadim smiles. When it comes to your true self, even a peddler who can't handle a single goblin could kill you quite easily, couldn't they? The demon's mind blank. He realizes what this means. In a hidden dark chamber deep inside the castle basement, a dark toxic puddle of blood is slowly forming on the stone floor. Stabbed flat to the ground is a grotesque pink-bulbed parasite brain with a singular horn, the true, physical body of the demon controlling Adlin. And a simple, mundane steel sword is driven right through its center. In the field, Adlin's mutated form begins to violently spasm, black blood erupting from his mouth as his connection to the core is severed. He screams in absolute, agonizing rage. Kadim just stands there, his smile turning incredibly smug as the boss's entire cheat code gets deleted in real time. Before we jump back into the present chaos, let's look at how Kadim actually set up this entire master plan. While they were scaling the castle walls, Kadim casually explained to a terrified Duncan that the Baron was hiding a demon in the basement. He knew this because a guy as obsessed with honor as the Baron would never stubbornly refuse to share a simple treasure with people who just saved his life. They reached the massive wooden door leading down to the hidden depths of the castle. And of course, the door was locked with a ridiculously oversized padlock and heavy iron chains. Kadim's version of barbarian lockpicking is very simple. He grabs the chains with his bare hands and violently tears them off, shattering the padlock like a piece of cheap plastic. He hands Duncan a dagger and tells him to wait until the moon passes its peak before going down. Duncan's eyes go wide, terrified of being sent on a solo mission against a literal demon. Kadim reassures him that the demon will be so busy fighting him in the main camp that its physical core will be completely defenseless. And that brings us back to the present moment, where Duncan has successfully driven the dagger straight into the fleshy mass. The true core of the parasite is pinned to the stone floor, dark blood oozing from its multi-eyed flesh. In the main camp, the giant, mutated Viscount Adlin claws at his chest in absolute agony. He realizes his spiritual connection to his main body is completely gone. His mouth twists into a horrific display of fangs as the realization sinks in. He screams in raw, unbridled fury, realizing he has been completely outplayed. Kadim smirks, silently thanking his cowardly merchant friend for actually clutching up when it mattered. The giant demon lets out a deafening roar, black blood pulsing through his mutated nodes. He promises to subject Kadim to the most agonizing, slow death imaginable, threatening to tear him limb from limb. Up on the castle walls, Duncan and the sentries watch in horror as the monster's muscles swell even larger. Kadim notes that even though the main core is dead, the dark malice already trapped inside the vessel won't just disappear instantly. The giant swings his massive spiked mace with terrifying speed. The impact rips up the stone floor, forcing Kadim to dodge. Kadim swings his hand axe to counter, but the cheap iron blade shatters into a million pieces against the demon's mutated skin. Adlin laughs, mocking the pathetic durability of human tools. He prepares to swing his mace down to turn our guy into a stain on the dirt. Kadim is forced to retreat, leaving him with nothing but his broken hilt. He drops the useless wood, staring at the empty air. The giant demon boasts that he will slaughter every single citizen in Molden before this vessel falls apart. Kadim suddenly looks up toward the castle ramparts and yells for the traveling merchant. Duncan is standing on the wall, sweating bullets. He swings his arm, launching the heavy item he retrieved from the basement. The object flies over the edge of the parapet into the open air. It is the legendary dwarven throwing axe. Duncan is instantly filled with regret, realizing his weak merchant arms couldn't possibly throw it far enough to reach the camp. But Kadim doesn't worry, because a throwing axe forged by master northern dwarves doesn't care about human physics. The weapon literally activates its own homing magic, accelerating through the air like a guided missile. It flies straight into Kadim's outstretched hand, with a solid, satisfying grip. The axe flares with a brilliant, pulsing blue energy. Duncan is completely speechless, watching the weapon cover 60 meters in a split second. Adlin's eyes widen as he recognizes the blue runic glow of dwarven craftsmanship. Kadim smiles, admiring the perfect balance of the steel. He chides the Baron for letting such a masterpiece gather dust in a locked basement. The giant demon demands to know how a mere barbarian knew about the existence of this legendary northern weapon. Kadim grips the handle tightly. For a possession type, you sure talk a lot. He steps forward, the blue light of the axe illuminating the dark battlefield. Now then, let's shut that mouth of yours. The giant roars, refusing to believe a single dwarven weapon can change his fate. He brings his massive spiked mace down with all his remaining strength. Kadim swings the dwarven throwing axe in a massive upward arc. The impact is deafening as the dwarven steel collides with the solid iron mace. And with a sound like shattering glass, the giant's weapon is instantly broken into tiny fragments. Kadim doesn't pause, continuing the motion into a clean, horizontal sweep. The blade slices straight through the giant's chest, a massive geyser of dark blood erupting into the air. Kadim rests the axe on his shoulder, highly satisfied with his new new high-tier gear. Duncan watches from the wall, sighing in relief. Adlin's massive, mutated body begins to collapse, the purple bulbs on his skin rapidly fading. The dark demonic aura dissolves into black ash, floating away in the night wind. Kadim notes that since the core is dead, the lingering malice in the puppets will soon dissipate completely. With the immediate threat neutralized, he prepares to head back. Suddenly, a heavy shadow falls over him from behind. Duncan screams from the wall, warning him to look out. Heavy boots slam into the stone floor as a sword is drawn. A sharp steel blade slashes through the air, aimed directly at Kadim's neck. Kadim sidesteps the strike effortlessly. He looks at his attacker, and his heart sinks. Standing before him, sword drawn, is Baron Molden. But the Baron's armor is covered in a thick, flickering purple fire. He raises his head, his eyes glowing a hollow, demonic red. "Did you think it was over, you shameless wild dog?" Kadim's face goes entirely still, as the chapter ends on a massive cliffhanger. We open chapter 24, with the possessed Baron mockingly asking if Kadim really thought the nightmare was over. The demon's voice sneers through the Baron's lips, demanding Kadim's attention. Kadim realizes the demon planted a secondary curse inside the Baron's mind long before this night. The demon gloats, explaining that his plan was to force the honorable Baron to witness the absolute destruction of his beloved city. He was so close to enjoying that sweet despair, until Kadim arrived and ruined everything. The demon's ultimate goal was never just conquest. It wanted to break the Baron's soul. He dares Kadim to strike, asking if he has the courage to butcher the Baron just like he did to Adlin. Kadim simply closes his eyes, completely unbothered. "You've got the wrong idea." He reminds the demon that he didn't intervene out of some heroic desire to save Molden. He simply made a practical trade. The demon laughs, pointing out that if Kadim kills the Baron here, the surrounding soldiers will hunt him down as a murderer. Kadim counters, asking if the soldiers wouldn't do the exact same thing if the demon kept possessing the Baron's body anyway. His tone drops to a freezing chill. "If Molden happens to turn against me, then I'll just slaughter them all." The demon's eyes widen, realizing this barbarian isn't some classic, soft-hearted hero. He is an absolute menace who will carry out that threat. The demon smiles, deciding that forcing Kadim to murder the Baron is still a satisfying consolation prize. Since his main core is dead, he is nothing more than a fading thought. He wants to go out savoring the tragedy. He swings the Baron's sword, charging at Kadim with desperate speed. Kadim watches the blade approach, his fingers tightening around the hilt of Mosquito. He prepares to deliver a clean counterstrike to end the fight. But suddenly, the Baron's body jerks, his foot dragging against the stone floor as he violently stops his own advance. The Baron's hand trembles as he clutches his head, his face twisting in intense pain. His grip on the sword turns white-knuckled as he fights for control. A low, agonizing growl escapes his throat as his original conscience will flares to life. Through sheer force of will, the Baron reclaims his own voice, declaring that the demon will never lay a single finger on Molden again. The demon is utterly horrified, unable to believe a mere human's willpower is actively suppressing his possession. Kadim pauses, his blade hovering in the air. With a final, desperate scream, the Baron turns his own sword inward, aiming the sharp point at his chest. The steel pierces straight through his thick plate armor. He drives the blade home with a sickening crunch of metal and bone. The sword protrudes from his back, a fountain of blood spilling onto the cold stone. The remaining purple demonic fire instantly disperses, completely snuffed out by the self-inflicted wound. Up on the ramparts, the sentries watch in absolute, stunned silence. They scream in terror, unable to understand why their beloved lord would stab himself. The Baron collapses to his knees, his armor clattering against the dirt. The demon's final thoughts are filled with pure disbelief that a human managed to drag him down to hell through suicide. The Baron's eyes begin to glaze over, his breathing shallow. He kneels before Kadim, his head bowed. Duncan runs up, his face pale, as he asks if the Baron is dead. Kadim looks down at the dying noble. No, not yet. He notes the sheer physical strength required to pierce through solid plate armor. The Baron admits it would have been impossible without utilizing the leftovers of the demon's own physical power. He coughs up dark blood, his voice barely a whisper. This time too, just like last time, Kadim stands quietly, letting the weight of the moment land. He steps forward, drawing his sword, Mosquito. He drives the blade gently into the edge of the Baron's wound, the crimson glyph on the steel flaring to life. The Baron gasps, feeling a sudden warmth spread through his chest, his breathing stabilizing. Kadim's sword is transferring a small stream of stolen life force to temporarily delay his death, buying him enough time for a final farewell. Kadim acknowledges his strength, pointing out that most ordinary men break completely under a demon's possession. The Baron smiles weakly, expressing his sincere gratitude to have a great warrior as his final companion. He closes his eyes, admitting he is filled with regrets about his past choices. He admits he should have destroyed the bizarre lump of flesh the moment he discovered it in the basement years ago. We see a flashback of the grotesque, multi-eyed parasite smiling up at a younger Baron. The demon whispered promises of prosperity, asking only that the Baron cherish his citizens like his own children. It seemed like an oddly benevolent request for a demon, so the young noble accepted, completely unaware of the trap. The demon kept its promise, and Molden became rich, while the Baron's pretense of love slowly became genuine, deep affection. But as his love for the city grew, so did his overwhelming guilt and anxiety. He lived in constant terror, knowing his paradise was built on a demonic contract that could be snatched away at any moment. Eventually, that day arrived when Adlin marched on his borders. The demon's true harvest was never the wealth. It was the deep, bottomless despair of a father watching his children die. The Baron laments that his entire life was a lie, and that even saving Molden required Kadim's strength rather than his own. Kadim shakes his head, reminding him that it was his own willpower that drove out the demon at the absolute last second. The Baron lets out a peaceful sigh, accepting those words. I suppose I put an end to this story with my own strength. Kadim closes his eyes in a silent, respectful nod. You did. The Baron's breathing slows to a final stop. Please, tell Delphina, tell her, I'm so sorry I couldn't protect them. His hand falls limp, his final breath escaping into the cool night air. The brave, tragic Lord of Molden passes away, sitting upright in his armor like a true king. Kadim stands over his body in silence. The siege of Molden is officially over, but a far deeper, more dangerous mystery has just begun. The heavy morning bells of Molden Castle ring out across the cold mountain valley. Inside, the garrison carries the wooden coffin containing their beloved lord. Baron Molden lies in peace, dressed in his finest noble garments for his final journey. Delphina watches the procession, tears silently streaming down her face. The soldiers stand in solemn ranks, their heads bowed in absolute grief. Black mourning flags flutter from the ramparts, casting a somber shadow over the city. The townspeople gather in the streets, praying for the soul of the man who sacrificed everything to feed them. Duncan watches the ceremony from a quiet corner, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Even Kadim stands in silent contemplation, his arms crossed as the heavy bell tolls echo through the courtyard. Outside the castle walls, the morning light reveals the horrific aftermath of the battle. The soldiers look at the giant, mutated corpse of Viscount Adlin, still struggling to comprehend what they are seeing. Captain Delton instructs his men to move the bodies of Adlin's troops to the burial grounds. They are utterly baffled, wondering how their neighbors transformed into such mindless, gray-skinned monsters overnight. And worse, they have no idea why Adlin's entire army of 400 soldiers simply died in their sleep when the parasite's core was destroyed. They look at the scrawny, hollowed-out faces of the dead, realizing these men were dead long before the battle even started. Delton sighs, knowing the only person who holds the answers is currently keeping his mouth shut tight. He glances toward the inner keep, his eyes filled with a quiet, lingering suspicion. Kadim walks through the inner gates, carrying himself with a heavy, stoic presence. The crowd of soldiers parts for him, silent and respectful, as he approaches the main courtyard. He addresses the garrison, telling them that Baron Molden fought their ancestral enemy until his very last breath. The soldiers listen intently, hang on his every word, as he delivers the final narrative of their lord. Kadim demands they open the gates to let the procession through. He declares that the Baron is a true man of honor, deserving of sleep in the very soil of the land he loved. Delton closes his eyes, deeply moved by the barbarian's words. He repeats the message to his men, reminding them that the Baron was a savior who cared for Molden more than anyone. He raises his sword, vowing that they will carry on his noble will and protect the castle to their dying breath. The soldiers let out a collective, solemn shout of agreement, their loyalty to the Molden name fully restored. Delton wipes a tear from his eye, his resolve hardening. He orders his men to clean up the courtyard quickly, as the Baroness's first official duty as the new lord is about to begin. Delphina steps out onto the balcony, looking down at the massive barbarian standing before her. She bows her head, expressing her deepest gratitude to the mercenary who saved her home. She thanks him on behalf of her late husband and every citizen who survived the winter. Kadim looks up, his expression completely neutral. There is no need for further thanks. He taps the handle of the dwarven throwing axe on his belt. I have already received my payment. Delphina looks at the ancient weapon, realizing its value, but still feels indebted. She signals her servants to bring forward a tray of gold coins and fresh travel rations. Kadim sighs, turning his back on the gold. It's fine. Put it away. Instead of taking their money, he gives them some massive, free loot. He tells her about the hidden bandit valley to the west. He explains that there are massive stores of food and supplies left behind, and since he already cleared the bandits, they can just go take it. Delphina bows even lower, overwhelmed by the man's unexpected generosity. She declares that from this day forward, Molden's doors are always open to him as their greatest benefactor. She asks him to visit again whenever his travels bring him back to the borderlands. Kadim doesn't promise anything, turning to leave with Duncan. But just as he reaches the outer archway, he stops in his tracks. He looks back at the mourning widow. Oh, right. Is your name Delphina? The Baroness is startled, wondering how a foreign barbarian could possibly know her private name. Kadim closes his eyes. The Baron left a final message for you. He said, Tulip, I couldn't protect you, I'm sorry. We see a brief memory of the Baron in his youth, laughing happily in a field of flowers, holding her hand. Delphina breaks down completely, tears streaming down her face as the private nickname confirms her husband's final thoughts. Kadim walks away, letting her mourn in peace. He tells her she can be proud of him, because he died as the Lord of Molden, not a demon. Back on the road, Duncan is doing his usual routine, loudly bragging about how he bravely navigated the dark basement to slay the beast. He reenacts the entire stealth mission with dramatic arm swings, calling himself a legendary demon hunter. Kadim glances back with a look look that instantly cuts the performance short. That's enough. He asks if Duncan brought the prize he requested, and the merchant quickly hands over a sealed leather flask. Inside is the dark, pulsing blood of the possession-type demon. Kadim popped the cork, examining the viscous fluid. In RPG terms, possession-type demon blood is extremely rare. It grants massive passive buffs, specifically high-tier immunity to mental debuffs. This is a massive win for his build. He needs this mental resistance to hold off his class's native madness debuff until he can reach Melissa. He looks down at his new dwarven throwing axe, completely satisfied with his trade. The runic engravings are flawless. He notes that he never even saw a weapon of this caliber during his first playthrough. This is an ancient masterwork from the Mythic era, when dwarves and elves fought for supremacy. It's easily a unique tier item. But his strategic brain starts ticking. Why would such a legendary dwarven masterpiece be sealed in a human noble's basement? He questions Duncan, asking if there was anything unusual in the chamber when he retrieved the axe. Duncan nervously mentions a faint white symbol painted on the chest, though it was too dark to see clearly. Kadim's eyes narrow. A mysterious symbol is a concerning clue, but going back to investigate is out of the question. He has left a massive trail of blood across the Imperial border, and high-level pursuers are definitely on his trail. He calculates their strength. Low-ranking paladins are fodder. High paladins are manageable if he has demon blood active. The real problem is the absolute peak of the Elga order, the Arch-Paladin. Kadim grinds his teeth, the memory of those self-righteous Templars bringing back nothing but bitter, annoying thoughts. And speaking of those fanatical paladins, Lady Helia Muviel is currently riding her divine steed, her blonde hair catching the wind. She looks back, calling her subordinate Adon too slow and pathetic for lagging behind. Her eyes are cold, completely focused on the hunt. They round the hill, and the massive towers of Molden Castle finally come into view across the river. Meanwhile, back on the forest path, Duncan suddenly screams at Kadim to stop. He catches his breath, panting heavily under his massive backpack, warning him that continuing down this road leads straight to the border guard post. He points toward a steep, narrow dirt trail, climbing up into the thick brush. Kadim pauses, realizing his anxiety about the Arch-Paladin tracking him made him lose his usual patience. He gives a short nod, turning onto the side path. Duncan walks behind him, his mind flashing back to the horrific sight of the Baron's suicide. He looks at Kadim's massive, battle-scarred back, his expression filled with a quiet, lingering dread. He starts to speak, calling out to him in a hesitant whisper. Kadim turns his head, his cold glare instantly making Duncan squeak in terror. The merchant immediately waves his hands, stammering that it's nothing and to never mind. Kadim lets out a low grunt, drawing his dwarven axe. He casually swings the heavy blade, cleanly shearing through a thick branch, blocking their path. Duncan falls silent, walking behind him with a heavy, anxious heart. Cut back to the road. Lady Helia is riding her white radiant horse at full speed toward the border. The divine steed's hooves kick up massive clouds of dust as it runs without showing a single sign of fatigue. Helia brings her mount to a sudden halt, looking back with an irritated sigh. She exhales slowly, her patience with her subordinate running thin. Edon finally catches up, his standard base game horse completely lathered in sweat and panting. The poor animal is practically foaming at the mouth, trying to keep pace with a literal pay-to-win divine mount. Helia complains that they aren't making any progress, telling Edon to move his horse faster. Edon grinds his teeth behind his iron visor, cursing his boss's absolute ignorance under his breath. He notes that her radiant horse is a divine beast, granted only to arch-paladins, capable of running hundreds of miles without tiring. He suggests they stop at Molden first to gather information about the target's whereabouts. Helia flatly refuses, explaining that the Imperial family issued a strict recommendation not to interfere with Molden's affairs. She looks down at him, her green eyes flashing with cold authority. Do not dare forget your duty, Eden. Eden's inner monologue is pure rage, calling her fanaticism absolutely ridiculous. He questions if shattering holy relics and executing peasants is truly Elga's will. Helia looks at the path ahead, deciding this slow pace is unacceptable. She tells Edan that since the target's route leads to the Free Cities Alliance, she will ride ahead on her radiant horse to intercept him. She whips her mount, charging forward in a white blur, leaving him behind. Edan reaches out a hand, but she is already gone, disappearing over the hill. He stands alone on the empty dirt road, and with nobody watching, he unloads a stream of holy curses that would make an inquisitor blush, calling her every name in the book. He instantly panics, clutching his chest and pathetically praying to Elga to forgive his profane mouth. He mutters to himself, asking why Elga is so unfair to grant such divine blessings to a cruel, arrogant woman, instead of a faithful believer like him. He catches himself having profane thoughts again, sighing heavily as he resigns himself to his fate. He mounts his horse, prepared to continue the boring tracking duty. He mutters some standard religious nonsense about the will of God being a profound abyss. But as he looks down at the dirt, he suddenly stops. He dismounts, kneeling in the dirt to examine a set of massive, deep footprints. He realizes the target's direction has suddenly turned off the main road, taking the rugged side path over the hill. Idan looks at the thick forest, noting that the target usually erases his tracks at crossroads. Why would he be so careless here? He steps onto the path, immediately spotting several cleanly cut branches and scattered vines on the ground. He gulps, the realization hitting him that the target is extremely close. He ties his sweating horse to a sturdy tree trunk, preparing for a stealth approach. He grips the hilt of his sword and secures his heavy shield. He creeps forward through the dense brush, his eyes scanning the shadows. He is fully focused, keeping his footfalls as quiet as possible. He pushes deeper into the thick forest, the branches scraping against his armor. He mutters that the trail is getting thicker, wondering where this side path actually leads. He curses the barbarian's map knowledge, wondering how a foreign slave knew about a hidden shortcut. Suddenly, a voice echoes through the trees ahead. "Sir, it's this way." Idan ducks behind a bush, his heart hammering against his ribs. He peeks through the leaves, spotting the massive, muscular frame of Kadim standing next to Duncan. He lets out a silent gasp of triumph, realizing his search is finally over. The man looks exactly like the image projected by Helia's past viewing mirror relic. He watches Kadim closely, his hand trembling on his sword hilt. He remembers that this barbarian caused their holy relic to shatter, a phenomenon that only happens when reflecting a great demon. He asks himself if he can really handle this monster alone. He decides his survival is more important than glory. He's done his part by finding the target, so he should let the success-crazed arch-paladin handle the actual fighting. Idan slowly takes a step backward to retreat, but see-crack. His heavy boot steps straight on a dry branch. In an instant, Kadim's ears twitch, his head snapping toward the sound. Idan freezes, cold sweat pooling inside his helmet. But before he can even think about running, the air splits as Kadim leaps through the foliage like a predator. Idan's vision is filled with a massive, overhead swing of the dwarven throwing axe. He barely manages to raise his heavy steel shield to block. The runic blade of the axe glows with a brilliant, humming blue light, and with a sound like a thunderclap, the dwarven steel collides with the holy shield. The force of the impact buckles Idan's knees, sending a violent shockwave traveling up his arms. And to his absolute horror, the dwarven axe doesn't just block, it literally shears straight through his blessed metal shield. The blade slices deep into his shoulder armor, blood spraying from the gap. Idan's shield is left split in half, his blessed defense completely useless after a single hit. Kadim leaps in for a second, finishing blow, his eyes glowing with dark, feral rage. "This fucking fanatic bastard!" Idan has a major problem. He is staring at a level 1 barbarian slave who moves like a maximum level raid boss. Our guy does not believe in waiting for his opponent to finish their internal monologue. He closes the gap instantly. The cold steel of Kadim's blade comes down, aimed directly at the center of the visor. Idan barely gets his sword up to block, the impact sending shockwaves of absolute force straight through his iron gauntlets. But blocking a main weapon against Kadim is just an invitation for his secondary attack. He drives a heavy, leather-wrapped boot directly into the center of Idan's holy shield. The force of the kick sends the paladin flying backward, crashing into the dirt like a dropped sack of scrap metal. He is gasping for air inside his helmet, realizing his body is not keeping up with this level of kinetic violence. The divine blessing on his shield is gone, and trying to lift that heavy steel without holy aid feels like dragging an anchor. He drops his defense entirely, sliding his arm free from the heavy straps as he tries to scramble back. Kadim does not give him an inch. He swings the dwarven throwing axe downward in a heavy, sweeping arc. The blade slices clean through the air, embedding itself deep into the discarded metal on the ground. The paladin's eyes widen behind his visor. He is realizing this brute is not just strong, he is wielding a legendary runic masterpiece. If he had not let go of that shield and rolled, his entire arm would currently be pinned to the dirt. A holy knight normally sticks to the main highways, Kadim says, his voice completely calm. "Did you follow me here?" Idan stays silent, staring at the absolute unit standing over him. Kadim pulls his masterwork axe from the shattered shield with a casual, effortless tug. "It seems you are completely on your own out here," he remarks, his crimson-tinted eyes flashing in the dark forest. The paladin feels a cold chill down his spine. The realization hits him. There are no witnesses in these woods to save him. He shifts his footing, trying to find enough leverage to build distance. He draws his sidearm, the steel catching the dim light filter through the dense canopy. Kadim's expression does not change. He has seen this exact desperate dance 1,000 times in his first playthrough. The paladin begins chanting, invoking his deity, "Sacred Guide of Light!" "Oh, Elga, grant me the strength." But this is not an anime where the villain politely waits for you to finish your magical girl transformation. Kadim flings the dwarven throwing axe. It spins through the air in a blur of runic blue light. The impact of the flying steel disrupts the holy spell before the incantation can even gather mana. Hey merchant, Kadim calls out toward the bushes. Go pick up my axe. Idan is clutching his side, his spell completely ruined, coughing up dust. He tries to focus on his opponent's feet, but Kadim has already vanished from his line of sight. The barbarian is already mid-swing, coming down from a blind spot. Idan raises his sword in a desperate high guard, his heart hammering against his ribs. The clash of their blades creates a shower of bright, metallic sparks. The pure physical weight of the strike forces Idan to his knees, his arms trembling under the pressure. Before he can recover his posture, Kadim shifts his weight and launches a rapid horizontal counter. The steel sweeps across, forcing the paladin to duck his head in a blind panic. But Kadim is already executing his next command. His movement is too fluid, too optimal. He slips his blade past the guard, aiming with surgical precision. Idan is losing his mind. This is not how a barbarian fights. This is a veteran swordsman who knows the exact weak points of church-issued armor plates. Another fast strike, the wind whistling as the blade cuts through his defensive space. With every block, Idan feels like his wrists are going to crack, and his shoulder joints are going to pop out. He feels like he is fighting a high-tier demon that somehow learned human martial arts. The blades bind together in a screeching slide of metal on metal. Kadim shifts his hand position, taking control of the leverage. He slams the hilt of his weapon down onto Eden's guard, forcing the paladin's hands down. A clean, open line presents itself. Kadim drives his sword straight into the unarmored joint beneath the paladin's right shoulder. The steel of Mosquito bites deep through the chainmail, the crimson glyph on the hilt flashing as it drinks. Eden lets out a ragged, throat-tearing scream as the blade pierces his flesh. His sword slips from his useless fingers, clattering onto the dirt floor. He stumbles back, clutching his right shoulder as a heavy flow of blood begins to saturate his surcoat. Based on your performance, you are definitely not an arch-paladin, Kadim says, flicking the blood off his blade. You are worse than the spear kid I dealt with on day one. Idan is breathing heavily, his right arm completely dead, his mind racing for any escape route. His eyes dart to his fallen sword, but he knows he cannot swing it with his left hand. Suddenly, he reaches down and flings a hidden throwing dagger straight at Kadim's face. Kadim tilts his head by a fraction of an inch, the throwing blade grazing past his cheek without leaving a mark. By the time the dagger lands, the paladin has already bolted into the dense brush, running for his life. Duncan finally stumbles out of the bushes, holding the giant runic axe like it is a live bomb. Sir, I brought the axe. Wait, he ran? Kadim takes the weapon from his hands. He did, which means we have a tracking bug to remove. Hashtag chapter 2080 down. Idan is sprinting through the dark forest, his heavy breaths echoing through his visor as his boots hit the dirt. His right arm is completely soaked in blood, the pain growing sharper with every step he takes. He throws off his heavy metal helmet, letting it clatter into the leaves along with his chest plate to shed weight. He needs to reach his horse. If he can just get back to the main road, he can warn Lady Helia about the monster hiding in these woods. Suddenly, a sharp whistling sound cuts through the wind behind him. A massive dark object tears through the canopy, crashing directly into the path right in front of his face. The ground explodes with dirt and leaves as the heavy iron head of the axe embeds itself into a tree trunk. The paladin stumbles back, falling hard onto his rear, his eyes wide with absolute despair. Kadim steps out of the shadows, his footsteps silent on the damp earth as he approaches the weapon. He pulls the dwarven axe out of the wood with a single hand. This time, you are going to answer my questions properly. Idan looks up, his face pale, spitting blood onto his own boots. I have nothing to say to a heretic. Just kill me. Kadim does not offer a grand heroic speech about justice or honor. He simply swings the side of the axe down. The heavy flat of the blade slams into Idan's collarbone, pinning him firmly against the trunk of the massive tree. The paladin lets out another choked scream as the pressure crushes his remaining good shoulder. Why would I kill you? Kadim asks, his voice completely flat, devoid of any anger. Keeping you alive while you bleed out is significantly more painful than a quick execution. He presses the cold runic steel a fraction of an inch deeper into the wound. Let us try this again. How many other holy knights are tracking this path with you? Duncan watches from behind a tree, his face pale, his hands trembling as he clutches his merchant pack. Isn't this too much? The paladin's jaw tightens. He looks like a man who has made a final, desperate decision. He bites down hard, his teeth sinking deep into his own tongue, trying to sever it to commit suicide through blood loss. Kadim's eyes narrow. He recognizes the suicide technique instantly from his first playthrough. Watch out! He's trying to bite his own tongue off, Duncan shrieks, pointing in panic. Blood pours from the paladin's mouth as he chokes on his own fluids, his eyes rolling back. What a useless, dramatic struggle, Kadim mutters, reaching out. He jams his heavy fingers directly into the paladin's jaw, forcing his mouth open with absolute, unyielding grip strength. As long as you can still blink, you are fully capable of answering an interrogation, Kadim explains. Blink twice if the answer is yes. One long blink if the answer is no. If you do not respond, the axe goes into your left knee. Eden stares up at him, realizing he is not dealing with a human barbarian, but a cold, logical machine. Kadim begins running his binary query. Are there other holy knights in this sector? Is the commander an arch-paladin? Did the orders come directly from the capital? The paladin's eyes flutter, blinking in rapid, involuntary patterns under the sheer terror of the threat. Having extracted the data, Kadim swings the axe one final time, finishing the task. The forest goes completely silent, save for the wind rustling through the high branches. Kadim stands over the body, watching the paladin's face go still in the moonlight. He looks peaceful, Kadim notes. The spear kid I killed on day 1 was a relative of the archbishop. That explains why an archpaladin is personally hunting a slave. Quote, "We have no time to waste. The tracker is already close." He turns, walking past Duncan without a second glance. Duncan struggles to keep up, his heavy backpack bouncing as he jogs. Why are we suddenly rushing? Is the rest of the army coming? And did you really have to do that to him? He was just following orders. Kadim stops dead in his tracks. The silence stretching between them is heavier than the trees. He turns his head slightly, his eyes cold. "Merchant, have you ever had your tongue ripped out? Or have you ever had your flesh burned off your bones while you were still conscious?" Duncan stammers, taking a step back. What? Have you ever lain in the dirt with your joints shattered, waiting for the birds to pick at your eyes while you are too weak to scream? The merchant shakes his head, his face completely devoid of color, his throat dry. "When my old party encountered an archpaladin 300 years ago, that is exactly what happened to them over a minor misunderstanding," Kadim says. "If I had not broken that tracker's will and extracted his data, we would currently be walking straight into an ambush." Duncan stays silent, his eyes fixed on the dirt, realizing the depth of the world they are navigating. "Listen closely," Kadim says, stepping closer until he towers over the merchant. "I have zero interest in leaving loose ends or playing the moral hero. That is a luxury reserved for people who sleep in warm beds. In a world where everyone wants us dead, I will commit whatever atrocity is required to reach my goal. That is how it has always been. That is how it will continue to be." Duncan's knees begin to shake. The reality of his situation is finally settling in. "So, what you are saying is," Duncan whispers, his voice cracking, "the second I lose my usefulness to you, you will discard me or leave me to die without a single thought? Please, sir, tell me. I do not want to be left behind for the monsters. What do I need to do to be like Baron Molden? How do I earn enough respect that you would actually fight to save me?" Kadim stares down at the trembling merchant for a long, quiet moment. "If you do not want to die," Kadim says, his voice low and steady, "then you need to prove the absolute value of your life to this team." He turns and continues walking down the dark path, his broad back disappearing into the foliage. Duncan stands alone in the clearing, the weight of his giant pack heavy on his shoulders. He takes a deep, shaky breath, tightens the straps of his pack, and hurries after the barbarian's shadow. The night canopy thickens, the stars barely visible through the dense leaves. In another part of the forest, a white horse stands tied to a low branch, its breath visible in the cold night air. Lady Helia Muviel steps into the clearing, her eyes scanning the ground for any trace of her scout. She notices the discarded helmet and the trail of blood heading deeper into the brush. Her expression does not change. It is the cold, unwavering face of an executioner. She knows her target is close. Very close. She reaches down and draws her golden-hilted sword, the blade instantly erupting into a roaring, high-temperature holy flame that illuminates the entire clearing. The hunt is no longer a search. The boss fight has officially begun. We open right back up in the dark woods. Kadim is on high alert, and Duncan is trying to match his pace. Our guy stops, turning around with that classic flat look that means someone is about to get a performance review. Duncan immediately flinches, like he just heard his boss say we need to have a quick chat. Kadim asks if they are actually on the right path, considering they have been wandering this forest for 2 straight days. For a guy who has completed this game once before, navigating should be simple, but the terrain is completely wrong. Duncan starts sweating, looking down like a kid who just accidentally formatted the company hard drive. He confesses they took a wrong turn hours ago, but he was too terrified to say anything after watching Kadim systematically dismantle that paladin scout yesterday. His inner monologue is basically a loop of absolute panic, realizing he is traveling with a walking hazard. He remembers yelling at Kadim about Baron Molden, asking what it takes to earn real respect in this party. Now he is chewing his lip, regretting every single life choice that led him to this exact forest. He mutters a quick apology, admitting they should have cleared the border plains by this point in the journey. Kadim does not even look angry. He just tells him to pull out the map so they can debug the route. Duncan checks the parchment, pointing out that the only forest nearby should be a tiny clearing you can cross in an afternoon. Kadim asks if the map is just cheap trash. Duncan defends it, saying it cost him 2,000 luden and is used by the top guilds. It was updated 3 years ago, meaning a forest of this scale geographically should not exist here. Kadim looks back at the trail. They haven't crossed their own tracks once, which means they aren't walking in circles. He realizes they are dealing with a spatial anomaly, the kind of map warping event that usually means a high-tier dungeon is leaking. But instead of overthinking the lore, he decides to get a high ground advantage. He points to a massive tree and tells Duncan to start climbing. Duncan scrambles up the branches, looking out over the endless canopy until he spots something rising in the distance. He calls down that he sees campfire smoke. Meanwhile, a giant blue snake slithers down the trunk right behind Kadim. Kadim does not even turn around as the snake coils, preparing to strike. The beast lunges, mouth wide open, showing off two fangs dripping with venom. Kadim casually reaches back and catches the snake by its neck mid-air, like he is grabbing a noodle out of a pot. The snake is completely flabbergasted, thrashing around, while Kadim looks at it with absolute boredom. He grabs the lower half of its body with his other hand, tightening his grip. He executes a clean, rapid pull, tearing the snake's head completely off its neck. Blood sprays across the grass as the severed head goes completely limp. The headless body falls to the dirt, twitching violently in its final death throes. Kadim tosses the head aside, preparing to keep walking toward the campfire. But the headless stump does not stop moving. It begins to bubble, the flesh writhing as a high-speed regeneration process kicks in. Kadim pauses, turning back to look at the carcass with a genuine spark of interest. The wound splits, the flesh constructing itself in a grotesque display of rapid cell division. Within seconds, the snake grows a new set of tails, specifically mutating into a two-tailed variant. Kadim analyzes the change. The creature didn't just heal, it actively evolved into a higher-tier monster class. Duncan slides down the tree, landing hard on his rear, looking like he is about to pass out. He asks, "What the hell is wrong with the wildlife in this place?" Kadim is currently holding the severed snake head. The severed head is not rotting, and more importantly, it isn't regenerating. The anomaly only affects the main body. Kadim tucks the head into his belt and tells Duncan to keep a sharp lookout for more reptiles. Duncan is running to keep up, throwing frantic glances at the twitching tail behind them. Kadim is deep in thought, running through his mental database of high-level monster traits. This specific type of mutation is a sign of deep spatial corruption, but he keeps his theories to himself. They follow the path until the glow of a warm campfire breaks through the dense underbrush. Sitting right next to the flames is a solitary figure, wrapped in a thick, tattered gray cloak. Kadim and Duncan step into the light of the campsite, their boots crunching on dry twigs. Our guy looms over the fire, his hand resting casually near the hilt of his weapon. The figure speaks in a raspy, phlegmatic voice, introducing himself as Nazran. Kadim just stares, waiting for the NPC to deliver the quest dialogue. The man pulls back his hood, revealing a face completely covered in horrific, bulbous pustules and nodules. He asks for their names, his single, visible eye looking wet and yellowed in the firelight. Duncan immediately steps forward with his merchant smile, introducing Kadim as a mercenary and himself as a traveling guide. Nazran cackles, explaining that he is a hunchbacked leper who has wandered into this desolate forest because he has nowhere else to go. Duncan feels a sudden wave of pity, though he points out that lighting a campfire in a dry forest is a massive safety hazard. Nazran grins, noting that this forest is perfect because there are no civilized people around to throw stones or salt at him. He tilts his head, his yellowed eye fixing onto Kadim's broad chest. He remarks that the barbarian does not seem afraid of disease, and mentions hearing that wasteland priestesses know miraculous healing magic. They did, Kadim says flatly, though I don't know if that's still the case in this era. Duncan catches the wording. He is starting to wonder why Kadim speaks about the world like he has been asleep for 3 centuries. Kadim cuts straight to the point, asking the leper if he knows the layout of this unmapped forest. Nazran chuckles, his shoulders bouncing under his cloak. I could tell you, but do you honestly expect a resource like that to be shared for free? Duncan immediately offers to share their rations, or pay him a few coins for the trouble. The leper waves off the money, saying he has no use for gold. Instead, he wants to trade a story for a story. He licks his dry lips and asks a highly crude, offensive question about the physical habits of barbarian women. He complains that his current condition has kept him from ever finding a partner. He continues detailing his vulgar fantasies, suggesting that even a leper could find company if the coin was right. Duncan is standing behind Kadim, sweating bullets, realizing this creep has absolutely no idea who he is talking to. Kadim takes a slow step forward, his boots heavy on the stone. You said your fingers and toes fell off. He points to the massive, bloated bundles of cloth wrapped around Nazran's arms. Nazran claims he stuffed them with straw. Kadim reaches down and firmly grabs the bloated bandage wraps in his vice grip. The leper's grin turns sharp. He tells the barbarian he is going to deeply regret touching him. Suddenly, the heavy linen wraps rip apart from the inside out. Duncan lets out a choked gasp, covering his mouth in pure disgust. Emerging from the bandages is not a stump, but a writhing, multi-jointed mass of twitching, fleshy fingers. Kadim does not waste a single millisecond. He draws Mosquito and swings in a clean horizontal arc. The air splits as the blade passes through, severing the mutated limb at the forearm. The massive twitching mass of fingers hits the dirt with a wet, heavy thud. Nazran stands completely still, blood pouring from the clean stump as the fire crackles between them. Then, he starts laughing, a wet, rattling sound. Thank you. I was actually hoping someone would cut those useless things off. Kadim keeps his blade raised, stepping in front of Duncan to keep the merchant behind his guard. The raw stump of Nazran's arm begins to bubble, the muscle fibers twisting and multiplying in a dark crimson blur. Flesh and bone reconstruct themselves at a speed that completely defies natural law. An entire new, fully formed hand, covered in bubbling pustule sprouts from the wound. The leper smiles. Didn't I tell you that you'd regret it?